Chapter 479. The snowstorm was still raging, and another layer of snow blew over. The snow immediately turned the little girl's hair and half of her face white, but she kept smiling. At the last moment of her life, she didn't think about the inheritance of the hero's knife, nor her pitiful background, but the group of children. This rice, is it enough for them to walk to Jiyun village? The protector's heart was in a mess, and even his voice became nervous. It should be enough. The little girl stared at him. If it's not enough, can you help them? Although she was dirty, her eyes were incomparably clear. Facing these eyes, the protector's heart trembled. He nodded slowly and firmly. I'll help. The little girl smiled again. Thank you. After saying these 3 words, her eyes slowly closed, and the weak aura also disappeared. Little girl, little girl, little girl. The protector screamed crazily and shook the little girl's shoulders desperately. Little girl, hold on, wake up, wake up. It was a pity that the little girl would never wake up. Her 13-year-old life was forever fixed in this barren land. With a thud, the cloth and herbs in Ding Wunhe's hand fell to the ground. She also rushed over and cried, Sister, wake up, wake up. A group of children also ran over and knelt on the snow, crying silently. The little girl kept smiling, as if telling them that even if she was gone, there was still hope. Tomorrow, it would definitely be a sunny day. The snowstorm didn't stop. Waves of snow continued to fall on the little girl's body, and her small body was quickly frozen into an ice sculpture. The guardian gazed at the cloth bags on the rock in a daze. The 13 bags of rice and noodles were exchanged by the little girl at the cost of her own life. If someone said that he would exchange his own life for 13 bags of rice 2 days ago, the guardian would definitely think that he was a lunatic. But now there was really such a lunatic doing such a thing. Perhaps she wasn't a lunatic. She was a real person, because only a real person would do a good deed that they thought was worth it without hesitation. Only this kind of person was worthy of being called a person. From beginning to end, the little girl didn't say her name. But was it important to have a name or not? This was the protector's own words. Yes, it didn't matter if she had a name or not. What mattered was whether she dared, whether she would go, and whether she would do it. What I've been doing all this time? The protector looked down at his padao. What I've been doing is standing here. In name, I'm protecting the village, but in reality, I'm watching these refugees die tragically one by one, and then feel heartache, indifference, and numbness. That's all. I've been standing here for 9 years. Is what I've done not as a protector of the protector's protector? What kind of protector am I? I'm just a puppet waiting to die. I'm not even as good as a child. The protector looked at the bag of rice on the rock in a daze. His heart was trembling, contracting, and convulsing. The intense pain caused his consciousness to fall into a trance. The little girl's final voice seemed to ring in his ear again. I said, You're different from the protectors of other places. You are a good person because you are willing to stay here for 9 years to protect them. You are different. How can I be different? The protector murmured. The voice seemed to be answering him. Because your heart will hurt. People who feel heartache are good people. Don't let them down. Another gust of wind and snow hit him head on. The protector cried quietly, his tears blurring his vision. However, the tears on his face were frozen by the wind and snow. Only then did the protector realize that the cold weather was still worsening. If it continued like this, all the problems could no longer be solved by food. He was an origin ability user and was not afraid of the cold, but this group of children was not. I can't save everyone here, but it shouldn't be a problem for me to save the remaining children, right? Thinking of this, the protector turned to Ding Wunhe and said, Wunhe, pack your things. You will go to Jiyun village at dawn. Ding Wunhe hesitated. But what about you, protector? The protector said, I'll be back soon. You wait for me here. He was also heading in the direction of the main city at the border. He was gone for a long time and did not return until noon. When he came back, he was in a similar situation as the little girl. He was also staggering and stumbling. The worst thing was that he was seriously injured. There were visible wounds all over his body. He looked like a man of blood. Ding Wunhe exclaimed and ran forward. Protector, what's wrong with you? The protector coughed violently. What came out of his mouth was no longer white gas, but blood. I'll go get medicine. Ding Wenhe was frightened. The protector grabbed her and stuffed an exquisite box into her hands. Go, get out of here quickly. What is this? Ding Wenhe didn't understand. The protector panted even harder. I don't have money. I can't give you travel expenses, and I can't see the city lord. Today is the city lord's birthday. I robbed the gifts of those rich people halfway. There's a pearl in this box. Take it to the town in Jiun village to exchange. You must live well. Don't let that little girl down. Treat her hero's knife. Well, Lord Protector. Ding Wenhe wanted to help him up, but he was pushed away. The protector could no longer stand steadily and sat down in the snow. Go. The guard will be here soon. If they catch up, we will all die. Ding Wenhe quickly turned around and called the group of children. Everyone hurriedly packed up their belongings. The protector also leaned back against the huge rock. The ice sculpture of the little girl's corpse sat beside him. The smile on the corpse's face never faded. The protector also showed a rare smile. Little girl, cough, cough. Did you see? I helped them. You can rest assured now. They will have it tomorrow. There will be hope. Blood had already dyed the snow red. The protector's consciousness was gradually weakening, and his vision was becoming more and more blurry. However, his heart was unusually calm. He had never been so calm in the past 9 years because he had done something that a protector should do. It was something that was filled with great significance. It made his life no longer dim, and his life was filled with brilliance. Whether or not he could survive was no longer important. The meaning of life was whether it shone brightly or not how long you could live. The protector's body was gradually turning cold, and his life force was slowly fading away. Just as he was about to close his eyes, the last thing he saw was that almost all the children had left. Only Ding Wenhe and the child called Xiao Meng remained. The two of them were crying as they knelt down in the distance. They respectfully kowtowed to him 3 times before they left. Holding each other's arms, the image suddenly twisted and spun. The telepathic thoughts stopped transmitting. Ding Meng withdrew the telepathic link. Although Lu Qing's eyes were still closed, her face was filled with tears. After a long time, she could finally speak. That child called Xiao Meng. Are you Mr. Ding Meng? Ding Meng did not answer her. He slowly stood up and walked to the window. He looked into the distance silently. After a long time, he spoke in a low voice. We left for a long time, but Sister Wenhe was worried about the protector and ran back. Lu Qing quickly asked, what happened after that? Ding Meng said expressionlessly, the protector died. His limbs were cut off with a sharp weapon. He froze to death in the snow. Lu Qing said, but you all survived. Ding Meng was still expressionless. We had 16 children. In the end, only Sister Wenhe and I survived. Lu Qing asked in shock, what about your other companions? Ding Meng said the snowstorm was too strong. Many people couldn't hold on halfway. They collapsed and never got up again. Lu Qing was speechless. She could understand Ding Meng's feelings. Along the way, Ding Meng had been given a chance to live by many descendants of Hero's Knife. These people had written chapters of heroism, unrestrained, bravely moving forward, and survival in a desperate situation. Many of them were ordinary people, but they had done many extraordinary things. Just like the little girl of the 13th generation and the protector, Ding Meng might not even know their names, but they would always live in Ding Meng's heart. However, Ding Meng was not willing to talk too much about the past. He changed his words and said, Miss Lu, you should be back to normal now. Try circulating your origin energy. Lu Qing nodded. She closed her eyes again and circulated the origin energy in her body. About 5 minutes later, she opened her eyes. There was an indescribable radiance on her face. Thank you. Ding Meng nodded. You're welcome. It was nothing. Lu Qing stared at him. There was a complicated look in her eyes. Through Ding Meng's telepathic message, she admired Ding Meng's strength and bravery. She also sympathized with Ding Meng's painful past. She also admired Ding Meng's courage. Lu Qing slowly got up and walked toward Ding Meng. Mr. Ding Ming, I have a presumptuous request. Ding Ming said indifferently. Go ahead. Lu Qing walked in front of him and said emotionally, I want to hug you. Can I? Ding Ming did not answer. His silence meant that he had acquiesced. Lu Qing moved closer to him. She opened her arms and gently hugged his shoulders. This was what she had asked for. This also meant that she had been cured. She was willing to trust a man. In fact, Ding Ming was indeed worthy of her trust. However, this hug was a little awkward because she was much taller than Ding Ming. Even if she lowered her head, her chin was still resting on Ding Ming's head. Ding Ming was not nervous in the face of this warm and soft body. He could feel that the distance between the two of them had narrowed. He had also witnessed Lu Qing's painful experience through the telepathic message. Therefore, he gently patted Lu Qing's back and stroked her soft hair. It's okay. It's all in the past. You're completely better now. Ding Ming comforted her. However, the next moment, the tranquil and warm atmosphere in the hall was destroyed by a voice from the second floor. Aha, I knew that your relationship wasn't simple. Hugging each other in the middle of the night. Hee, I caught you. Chapter 480. At the top of the stairs on the second floor, Su Linghua looked at Ding Ming and Lu Qing with a sly smile. Lu Qing didn't blush. She said naturally, it's okay to hug. What's so strange about that? When she said this, she secretly used her eyes. A towel on the sofa flew up on its own and floated towards Su Linghua as if it had eyes of its own. Su Linghua caught the towel and was pleasantly surprised. Qing, you've recovered? She had already sensed a trace of cold energy from the towel. Lu Qing was of the ice element. Lu Qing let go of Ding Ming and smiled. It's all thanks to Mr. Ding Ming's careful treatment. Su Linghua quickly ran downstairs and walked up to Lu Qing, looking her up and down carefully. Lu Qing's complexion had obviously improved. In the past, although Lu Qing was also radiant, that was an illusion given by her beautiful appearance and beautiful appearance. At this moment, Lu Qing was truly bright and moving. That kind of brilliance was naturally emitted by her skin and not brought about by makeup. Lu Qing smiled and opened her palm. With a soft clang, a crystal blue icicle was formed in an instant. She shook her hand, and the icicle was vaporized. Su Linghua was overjoyed. You've really recovered. Ding Ming's eyelids drooped. Miss Su, you didn't rest in the middle of the night just to peek. This time, Su Linghua didn't dare to act rashly in front of Ding Ming. She bowed respectfully. Mr. Ting, you're really a master. You've cured the hidden illness that has troubled Qing for years. Thank you, Mr. Ding Ming. Ding Ming waved his hand. You're welcome. Su Linghua looked at Lu Qing with a smile. Of course, Lu Qing knew why Su Linghua was smiling. For so many years, Su Linghua had always kept people at arm's length. This time, she actually took the initiative to hug another person. Su Linghua would never believe that she wasn't interested in Ding Ming. Lu Qing said, Sister Yu, don't misunderstand my relationship with Mr. Ding Ming. We are friends. Su Linghua's smile widened. Yes. Friends. Boyfriend and girlfriend, right? They're definitely not boyfriend and girlfriend. Lu Qing vetoed the idea, but her tone changed quickly. But if he's really my boyfriend, then Mr. Ding Ming is my first choice. Su Linghua was grinning from ear to ear. Ding Ming, you got a great deal this time. My Xiao Qing has never had a target before. Ding Ming said helplessly, there are risks in choosing me. Lu Qing looked at him. What risk? There are many risks involved. You'll know in the future. It's better for you to be cautious. Ding Ming was obviously not interested in the topic. He changed his mind. Right? It's time for you to tell me what the recruitment of the Water Sakura Union is about. Lu Qing had learned of Ding Ming's background. She knew very well that Ding Ming was not from her world and would certainly find a way to return to the Holy Grail Federation. Therefore, she took the initiative to say, in fact, you're very suitable for the recruitment. Technically speaking, it's not a recruitment, but a joint reconnaissance operation. Oh, Ding Ming was finally interested. What kind of reconnaissance operation? Su Linghua knew that her friend had truly trusted Ding Ming after her explanation. Therefore, she explained, Mr. Ting, You may not know this because you're new here, but the Long Voyage Alliance has developed a very special starship. The materials of a starship are extremely difficult to get. It can resist the scourge of space storms. Ding Ming asked in surprise, "Are you trying to open a wormhole and perform a space jump?" Lu Qing shook her head. "It's not as exaggerated as a space jump, but it does require mid-long distance space transmission." Ding Ming frowned. "Where are you going?" Su Lingwei opened her hands and said, "We don't know. Only the president, and she would know the specific coordinates." Lu Qing said, "The Water Sakura Union has always been dedicated to the development of energy. Just like the Long Voyage Alliance, we lack experts. That's why we have this recruitment operation." Ding Ming looked at her and said thoughtfully, "You don't lack experts, do you?" It was not unreasonable for him to say that. Let's talk about Lu Qing first. In terms of talent, Lu Qing was not inferior to him at all. It must be noted that Lu Qing had stopped training for 8 years. Although Ding Ming had been training all the time and had many adventures and skills like the anti-gravity force field, it had been more than 10 years. If they really had the same training conditions, Ding Ming did not think that Lu Qing would be worse than him. Then, there was Lin Aoshue. In fact, when he saw Lin Aoshue during the day, Ding Ming felt tremendous pressure because there were only 2 people in this place that he could not see through. One of them was Heaven's Peak, and the other was Lin Aoshue, the leader of the Water Sakura Union. Ding Ming asked, "So you want to recruit some experts?" Lu Qing smiled bitterly. "In fact, we can't recruit real experts. For example, we can't pay a top expert like Heaven's Peak to work for us." Ding Ming was puzzled. But Heaven's Peak still came today. Su Lingwei sighed. He didn't come for the event. He came to support Sheng Tianming. This time, we're not only recruiting experts who are strong, but also teams with good teamwork. For example, Mr. Ding Ming, we can tell that you and your companions are not simple. Ding Ming was curious. "You can tell?" Su Lingwei blushed. "I can't tell, but the president told me that you and Miss June are not simple." Ding Ming thought to himself that Lin Aoshue was not a simple person. She did have a sharp eye. Lu Qing's eyes flashed, and she said in a low voice, "Mr. Ding Ming and Miss June are not simple, are you?" Ding Ming glanced at her. "You think too much. I'm not interested in your so-called beauties." Oh, Lu Qing seemed to be unwilling to give up, but in fact, the corners of her mouth curled up. She only needed to know that Ding Ming was not Ding Ming's woman. But even so, she was not afraid. She had her pride. If she really wanted to pursue Ding Ming, she dared to say that she was the most competitive one. She had this confidence. Of course, she would never believe Ding Ming's answer. According to the psychic information that Ding Ming showed her, Ding Ming was basically a 1,000-year-old bachelor. It would be strange if such a person was not interested in women. There were no women that men were not interested in. There were only women who could not attract men. Ding Ming muttered to himself irresolutely, "Can I understand it this way? The people you are recruiting this time are relatively young?" Su Lingwei said, "That's right. Starlink has always advocated for young people to travel to outer space. First, they can increase their qualifications, and second, they can train themselves. Sheng Tianming is actually very ordinary, but since Sheng Tianfeng came to our Water Cherry Society, the president has no choice but to give him some face." Ding Ming said, "So he can also be selected?" Su Lingwei nodded. "That's for sure. After the banquet last night, the president decided on the list. Sheng Tianming and the others have a total of 5 people." Ding Ming's gaze turned to Lu Qing. "Is the fluxer who injured your mental force on the list?" Su Lingwei immediately answered, "Are you talking about Ing Tianlong?" Lu Qing's expression was somewhat unnatural. "Yes, him." Su Lingyue's expression was also unsightly. She sighed. "Unfortunately, he came here with Sheng Tianming. He's on the list." Ding Ming said, "It's fine. You better be obedient and not do anything out of line." Su Lingwei curled her lips. "What if he doesn't behave?" Ding Ming sneered. "Then I can make him forget about using origin energy for 8 years." Su Lingwei immediately looked at Lu Qing. "Oh, your future boyfriend is pretty good to you." Lu Qing giggled. "Look at your jealousy. Why is it so sour?" Ding Ming was too lazy to joke with them. All right, I won't disturb your rest. I'll go back first. Since he wanted to leave, Lu Qing and Su Lingyue couldn't force him to stay. The two beauties personally escorted him back to the villa. This treatment was definitely unique among all the guests. At this moment, Junling was actually on the first floor of the villa. It seemed that she had just come out of the induction cabin and was sitting alone on the sofa, drinking a drink. Seeing Lu Qing and Su Lingyue send Ding Ming back, she was neither surprised nor greeted them. In fact, the way a woman of steel greeted them was very special. Junling's wrist shook slightly, and a drink can on the coffee table flew toward Ding Ming. Ding Ming reached out and caught it. He was a little surprised. How long has it been? You've improved so quickly. There were many types of energy attached to the jar. Heat energy, ice energy, electromagnetic energy, rigid body, biochemical energy, and traces of telekinesis. Moreover, they were attached very evenly, proving that Junling's understanding of telekinesis had deepened in a short period of time. Junling said indifferently, "There are some questions that I don't understand, so I came out to find you. In the end, you weren't here. It turns out that you went out to find a woman to play with." "What do you mean by find a woman to play with?" Su Lingyue was dissatisfied. "Are we used to be played?" Junling glanced at her. "Isn't that so?" Su Lingyue looked like she was about to go forward and argue, but was unexpectedly pulled back by Lu Qing. She secretly gave her a look, meaning that after all, this was Ding Ming's companion. She must not be rash. Lu Qing smiled and said, "Miss Jun, please forgive me for not being a good host." Junling also sized her up. "Your complexion is better than during the day. Is it because of Ding Ming?" Lu Qing really didn't know how to answer, but she was still very honest. "Yes, Mr. Ting cured my illness." Junling nodded, got up, and walked toward the inner room, leaving behind a sentence that made Lu Qing and Su Lingyue dumbfounded. "Your aura is so strong, but I advise you, you must not have children with men." No matter how generous Lu Qing was, she couldn't help but blush when she heard this. Su Lingyue, on the other hand, was so angry that her willow branches stood up. "This girl, what kind of nonsense is in her head?" Ding Ming also drooped his eyelids. "Forget it. She's always had a novel way of thinking. I can't keep up. Please go back. I appreciate your kindness." Chapter 481. The next morning, Ding Ming's group left the villa area early in the morning. Cultivators who had reached the war sovereign level and above basically didn't need to sleep much. This time, AI Lu led them back to the plaza. There were much fewer people in the plaza today. Apart from the Water Cherry Society's upper echelons and staff, there were only about 30 or so people left. A small transport ship was already waiting on the tarmac outside. It looked like it was preparing to transport everyone to another star ring. Sure enough, AI Lu gestured to Ding Ming. "Mr. Ting, Miss Jun, please board the ship." This ship was a typical sightseeing ship. Apart from the cockpit at the front of the ship, there was a large hall in the middle where one could enjoy the scenery. The cabin wasn't made of alloy steel, but instead of glass. The view of the star ring outside was clearly visible to the naked eye. The 30 or so people who boarded the ship were divided into 6 groups. They were actually the representatives of the 6 great sections. The Water Cherry Society's upper echelons, led by Lin Aoshua, were all present. The Crusade Army had a total of 5 people. Sheng Tianming was the leader, while the other 4 were all old fellows. However, Ding Ming had already learned from AI Lu that the shortest and most sinister-looking of the 4 old fellows was Ying Tianlong. Perhaps it was because Lin Aoshua was present, but Sheng Tianming's group didn't make a big fuss. They obediently sat in the booth and enjoyed their breakfast. The Blood War Temple had sent out a group of 6. The leader was a young couple. According to AI Lu, this couple was a very famous young talent in the Alliance. The man was called Kuan Ran, and the woman was called He Qian. The two of them looked like a perfect match. Ding Ming could sense that this couple was very low-key. They were completely controlling their origin energy and didn't even release a trace of it. Qian Huanyu had sent out a total of 4 people. The leader was an old man with white hair and a pair of low-light glasses. Looking at their attire and the anti-gravity toolbox at their waist, Ding Ming wondered if Qian Huanyu's people were involved in some kind of technological research. The last group was naturally from the blue light group. There were 6 people in total, and they didn't look very young. They were probably in their 50s, and they were all dressed in suits and leather shoes. However, one of them was staring at Ding Ming's group. "I've heard a lot about you, Mr. Ding Ming. I finally get to meet you in person." The handsome man took the initiative to greet him. Ding Ming secretly raised his guard because he knew who this person was. This person's name was Bo Ji, and he was the brother of Bo Ting, the commander of the First Fleet. Bo Ting was first punished by Cardega, and when he landed on Azure Tree Planet, he was sent into the endless abyss of the universe by a super life form. The other sects probably didn't know what had happened on Azure Tree Planet, but the blue light group definitely knew. After all, Jiang Ning had survived, and Ding Ming was on Cardega's side. One could imagine that even if this Bo Ji wasn't Ding Ming's enemy, he was definitely not an ally. "Hello," Ding Ming calmly greeted him. Bo Ji smiled. "Mr. Ting is younger than I thought. You're really young and promising." Ding Ming calmly replied, "I'm really young, but I don't dare claim that I'm promising." Bo Ji smiled and said, "That's not necessarily true. Even Jian's team was defeated by Mr. Ting. Is there anything that Mr. Ting doesn't dare to do?" When Bo Ji spoke with such a fake smile, Ding Ming and the others quickly raised their guard and turned to stare at Bo Ji. At this time, someone in the booth was eating porridge. When he heard this, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Bo Ji indifferently. Bo Ji's expression changed, and he actually cowered. He smiled awkwardly and said, "I won't disturb Mr. Ting. Enjoy your meal." Ding Ming turned his head and saw that the person in the booth next to him was the young man who had eaten noodles in the banquet hall last night. The young man was still as thin, and his attitude was still as indifferent. Even when he was eating porridge, he still looked unhurried. However, Ding Ming already knew this person's information. This person's name was Dan Tung, and he didn't belong to the 6 major sects. He was a newcomer who had just entered Starlink through the arena. Dan Tung's first impression was that he didn't like to talk much. He gave off a cold and unapproachable vibe. However, what was interesting was that the person eating and drinking across from him was actually Elephant. Moreover, Elephant seemed to treat him quite well, inviting him to eat and drink together. Dan Tung neither refused nor responded. He just silently ate his porridge. Judging from his indifferent expression, it was as if he was telling everyone around him that only Elephant was qualified to sit across from him, and that everyone else should stay away from him. Ding Ming couldn't help but smile. There were quite a few experts gathered for this operation. So far, it seemed that none of them were weak newbies. The transport ship quickly rose into the air and flew toward the inner rim. At this time, Lin Aoshua led a group of beautiful women to the center of the hall and greeted the people from the 6 major sects in a friendly manner. In truth, she wasn't interested in Ding Ming, Sheng Tianming, or Kuan Ran. She was mainly talking to the old man who was leading Qian Huanyu's group. "Mr. Ming, you're old but vigorous. I didn't expect you to personally lead the team," Lin Aoshua greeted with a smile. Mr. Ming's real name was Ming Huaji, and he was the most authoritative appraiser in the entire alliance. This was one of the most respected professions in the God War Star Zone. It was common knowledge that the God War Star Zone didn't have many resources. Most of the resources were controlled by the Alliance and provided for the operation of Starlink. Thus, when people obtained something good, they would often find a professional to appraise it. Gradually, the profession of appraiser was born. Appraisers were origin energy users themselves, and they were well-versed in various fields of knowledge. There was almost nothing they didn't know. For Ming Huaji to be called a master, it was obvious that Qian Huanyu had sent this group of people for a reason. Ming Huaji replied politely, "Boss Lin, you must be joking. I was bringing a few students out to broaden their horizons." Lin Aoshua smiled. "Mr. Ming, I'm afraid you're not simply here to broaden your horizons, are you? You must have some opinions about us using the Long Voyage Alliance's newly developed starships, right?" Ming Huaji sighed. I did suggest using a method with lower risks, but since Boss Lin insisted, I had no choice but to comply. It was difficult for outsiders to understand their conversation, but fortunately, Lu Qing, who was standing behind Lin Aoshua, had secretly established a telepathic link with Ding Ming. She transmitted a telepathic message, and Ding Ming immediately knew what they were talking about. For a long time, energy had been the most discussed topic in the alliance. Because the Water Sakura Association controlled most of the energy, it received the most attention. In the past decade, many people had noticed that the Long Voyage Alliance's investment in starship research had been increasing like a rolling snowball. The speed of research and development had been accelerating, and the frequency of the Water Sakura Association's exploration had also increased correspondingly. The size of the fleet they used was also increasing. Many people had thought a problem. The Godly War starring had been running on such a large scale for hundreds of years. Was the supply of energy running out? Lin Aoshua never gave an answer to this question, but everyone had a guess in this regard. The supply of energy should be very tight. Once the starring could not keep up with the supply of energy, although it would not stop running, the starring's normal operation was related to the future of the entire Godly War starfield. The message from Lu Qing also specifically stated that the God War starfield was not a complete starfield hundreds of years ago. This was a battlefield where several different civilizations had fought. In the end, each of them had suffered great losses. Only the remaining human world had managed to survive. They had stayed in this starfield after the war and were struggling at death's door. In other words, the Godly War starfield was not a place to live for long. The appearance and development of the starring had only delayed the decline of the Godly War starfield. Because the resources would be exhausted sooner or later, the Alliance had always attached great importance to the issue of energy. The higher-ups and insightful people above them had a more long-term vision. Many of them were already thinking about the future of the human world in the Godly War starfield. On this issue, the Alliance was divided into two factions. One faction's view was that they should continue to develop technology, explore other galaxies, and search for new energy sources for the development of the starring. This faction was led by the Water Sakura Association, which had the support of the Long Voyage Alliance and the Blue Light Group. The person who held this view was Lin Aoshua. The other faction was the opposing faction. They believed that this was not a long-term solution. They should take the initiative to explore green galaxies, find habitable planets, and establish colonies. After long-term development, they would develop a highly developed human world in the future. This faction was led by the Holy War Army, which had the support of the Blood War Temple and Qianhuanyu. The opposing faction's representative was Ming Huaji. In short, it was impossible to determine which of the two factions was right. This issue had been debated for many years. As the Long Voyage Alliance continued to build fleets capable of interstellar voyages, everyone put their views into practice. Of course, as the Water Sakura Association continued to transport various kinds of energy sources, more and more people supported Lin Aoshua. For example, this reconnaissance operation was approved by the higher-ups of the Alliance through unanimous vote. Ming Huaji could not object. However, since he wanted to come along, Lin Aoshua had to take him seriously. Elder Ming, you're an authority and a well-known figure. In fact, I'm not afraid to say. Lin Aoshua paused and finally said something shocking. Based on the current scale of the Godly War starring, if we don't continue to expand, the starring will continue to operate for no more than 72 years. This was the first time she had directly answered the question of energy sources in public. Shiwen, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. The exact time is 72 years, 8 months, 9 days, 12 hours, 3 minutes, and 50 seconds later. The energy storage value will reach 0. For a moment, the entire hall was so quiet that everyone could hear their own heartbeats. This time period might not be a concept for outsiders like Ding Ming and the others, but for those who had lived on the starring for a long time, everyone knew what this meant. This meant that the starring's lifespan was less than 72 years. Once the energy source was exhausted, the starring would fall into eternal darkness. The entire Godly War starring would return to the chaotic era of hundreds of years ago. The end was imminent. Chapter 482. Hearing this answer from Lin Aoshue's mouth, Ming Huaji fell silent. This meant that the idea he had been advocating for a long time would not be supported by the upper echelons of the Alliance. Starlink itself already had very little energy, so it was even more impossible for it to support interstellar travel and the establishment of colonies. Lin Aoshue then said, "In fact, even if we have enough energy, it's not realistic to establish colonies and achieve interstellar migration." Ming Huaji understood this as well. Interstellar migration was never a simple matter. Many of the bastions in the God's War starfield had been migrated here many years ago by humans from other starfields. That was the problem. Even a small bastion was enough for people to fight to the death, let alone a green planet in a habitable system. If such a place was really discovered, it would not be just a matter of two families fighting. Instead, it would be a war between two civilizations. It would even escalate to the level of multiple civilizations fighting. That scale of competition would definitely be a long and grand interstellar war. Therefore, the problem returned to the original point, energy. Without enough or even abundant energy, how could you fight with others? He Qian said, "Boss Lin, is our alliance's energy really only enough to last for 70 years? Lin Aoshue's eyes fell on Ming Huaji. "I think Mr. Ming has more authority than me on this question." Ming Huaji nodded with a serious expression. The God's War starfield is dominated by Starlink, and Starlink's operation mainly depends on the crystal energy converted from silver core stones and the superconducting magnetic field. Although I don't know the specific energy storage value, from a logical deduction, the future of the God's War starfield is not optimistic. Sheng Tianming's attitude also became humble. "Mr. Ming, please enlighten me." Ming Huaji's tone was very depressed. "Let's not talk about crystal energy. It's the basic energy source to maintain all equipment and facilities. The key is that the God's War starfield is too far away from the main star system. As far as I know, in the past 50 years, it's been very difficult for us to find a natural silver core or within 100 light years." 100 light years was an exaggeration, but everyone present understood that 100 light years was a limit. The Alliance's exploration and transport starships could only operate within this range. It was not that they could not fly out, but if they flew too far, even if they found silver core, or it would not be worth it. The energy used for space transmission was astronomical. Furthermore, 100 light years away was far beyond the control of a large fleet. Who could guarantee that the civilizations of other planets were doing the same thing as them? If they encountered each other, the possibility of a fight would be higher. Since natural silver core ores could not be found, the only option was artificial. However, everyone knew that artificial silver core ores were even worse than pirated silver core ores. They could barely be installed on starships, but if they wanted to operate a massive project like Starlink, they would be dreaming. Kuan Ran muttered to himself and said, "CEO Lin, Elder Ming, I'm just saying is there a new type of energy that we can use?" Lin Aoshue nodded. "Your hypothesis is very good. What if there's a new type of energy fluctuation whose fluctuation value is 1,000 times that of a pure natural silver core? Do you all think we should use it? If even the fluctuation value was 1,000 times that of a silver core ores, just how powerful was the object that emitted the fluctuation? It was obvious that it was an extremely precious and rare material in the universe. Everyone present was smart, and when they heard Lin Aoshue's example, they immediately understood that this mission was most likely to be to search for such a material. Dingming also came to her senses. It was no wonder that the recruitment had been so secretive. They were afraid that the news would be leaked. The Water Cherry Association would not dare to attract the attention of the powerhouses when they were recruiting. If only people like Towering Sky, Peak gathered together, they would not be able to get their hands on such a material. If they could not get their hands on such a material, it would cause trouble for the outside world. Lin Aoshue had considered this matter quite thoroughly. However, Lin Aoshua had revealed this information to everyone in this place. She believed that no one present would dare to leak this information. This operation wasn't a big one, as it didn't require too many people or resources. However, it wasn't a small one either, as it most likely involved Starling's future. Lin Aoshua once again said to Ming Huaji meaningfully, "Elder Ming, this discovery has actually been made for several years, but we have only decided to take action today. We have also done a lot of analysis and preparation. For this mission, Shiwen will be the overall commander of the operation. I hope Elder Ming can understand." Ming Huaji was still in a state of shock. If the energy source Lin Aoshua mentioned really existed, not only would Lin Aoshua's interstellar voyage plan be realized, but his interstellar migration plan would also be discussed at the conference table of the upper echelons. No problem. Ming Huaji glanced at Shiwen, who had a classical temperament. "I have long heard of Miss Shiwen's name. I never thought that I would be able to work with you one day. It is my honor." Shiwen still had a cold and indifferent expression. "Elder Ming, you are too polite." Lin Aoshua glanced at Sheng Tianming again. "I believe that all of you have come into contact with exploration work before. In fact, the most important thing is to be united and follow orders. Only by working together can we make progress. However, if personal problems arise, the gains will not make up for the losses. What do you think, young Master Ming?" The warning in these words was very strong. She meant that after the departure, they must put away their dirty thoughts and not invest their energy in the relationships between young men and women. Sheng Tianming was startled at first, but then he smiled and said, "Yes, yes, yes. President Lin's instructions are very correct. I will definitely remember President Lin's teachings." Hearing this, Ding Meng wondered if Lu Qing was also going to participate in this operation. Lu Qing seemed to know what he was thinking and immediately transmitted her telepathic thoughts. "Apart from the president and Sister Bai, all four of us will be participating in this operation." Ding Meng said, "In that case, more than half of your upper echelons will be participating. It seems that this energy source is very important." Lu Qing said, "The president does indeed attach great importance to this operation. Even the three of us do not know the destination." Ding Meng asked, "Which ring are we in right now?" Lu Qing said, "You don't have to guess. We will board the ship directly. We are about to break through the atmosphere. If you don't believe me, you can look outside." Ding Meng heard this and looked outside the window. The transport ship had already left the star ring and was rapidly rising. Outside, it was all clouds and white fog. In the pitch-black space, there was nothing but the stars in the distance. However, after the transport ship had flown for a while, a huge starship in space slowly shed its energy camouflage and turned from a transparent state into a solid state. This was the first time Ding Meng had seen such a huge starship. From the outside, it was even larger than the carrier. Lu Qing's telepathic thoughts transmitted over. The Sovereign Starship is 14,000 meters long, 600 meters tall, and 2,400 meters wide. It is equipped with 6 special weapon systems, 18 conventional weapon systems, 8 defense systems, 48 loading stations, 256 ship berths, and 5,000 machine berths. This scale was not inferior to a small space station. At least, Ding Meng had never seen such a huge starship before. The shape of this starship was also different from the concept of a conventional starship. Its main body was similar to a beetle, and the tail was a separate booster cabin that extended out. The main body extended out balanced wings in 8 different directions. If one looked down from above, the starship was a mutant beetle. If one looked down from the tail, the starship was like a multi-winged pterosaur. If one looked up from the bottom, the starship was like a marlin in the water. And if one looked up from the side, the starship was like a flying bat. This sovereign floated in space like a huge space monster. It was dark and heavy, giving off a mysterious and domineering feeling. Just the design of this outer appearance must have taken a lot of effort from the engineers of the Long Voyage Alliance. Ding Meng also believed that this monster-like starship was by no means comparable to an ordinary starship. It must have many powerful and advanced functions. The transport ship flew into the docking port of the starship, like a fish egg being retrieved into a fish's stomach. It was enough to show the exaggerated scale of this starship. There were only 3 people at the docking port. The person standing on the left side of the connecting cabin was actually Kataga. Kataga greeted him warmly. "Brother Ding, I knew you would come. Come, let me introduce you to the deputy leader of our long voyage alliance, who is also the commander-in-chief of this starship." Ding Ming had already seen a tall, middle-aged man standing in the middle. His information was displayed in Xiao AI's database. This man's name was Dong Yi, the deputy leader of the Long Voyage Alliance. He was 85 years old this year and was the best starship commander in the Long Voyage Alliance and even the entire alliance. It was said that he had 70 years of interstellar navigation experience, which meant that this person began to deal with starships when he was 15 years old. In terms of flying skills, fleet scheduling, navigation command, and so on, if he dared to claim to be second, no one in the entire alliance would dare to claim to be first. Standing on the right side of Dong, it was a beautiful woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. She was tall and wore a neat uniform. She looked very capable and had the temperament of a woman in the workplace. Her name was Catherine, and she was also one of the senior fleet commanders of the Long Voyage Alliance. She was also a data master and served as Dong Yi's assistant. Kataga probably told Dong Yi about Ding Ming in advance. Dong Yi was very polite to him and was the first to take the initiative to shake hands with him. "Brother Ding, I've heard a lot about you. Today, I finally get to meet you in person. Our Long Voyage Alliance is really fated to meet you. We're fortunate to be appreciated by you and have the honor of going on this interstellar journey with you." He did not dare to be too straightforward. After all, Lin Aoshue had not left yet. However, he spoke tactfully, but the people of the Water Cherry Club could still tell that the Long Voyage Alliance was very lucky to have recruited a talent like Ding Ming. Lin Aoshue, in particular, did not look very good at the moment. Last night in the banquet hall, she had sensed that this young man, named Ding Ming, was not to be underestimated. He was less than 30 years old, but he had the strength of at least level 7 Spirit General, which was the level of an intermediate warlord. She also knew what had happened in the villa area later. She was really surprised that the younger generation would surpass the older generation. The hidden disease that had troubled Lu Qing for 8 years had been cured by Ding Ming. If the Long Voyage Alliance had not recruited this person first, Ding Ming would definitely be a member of the Water Cherry Club. If things went well, it was very likely that Ding Ming would become the son-in-law of the Water Cherry Club. Chapter 483. After successfully boarding the ship, the transport ship returned with Lin Aoshue and the others. Catherine, on the other hand, began to narrate to them. 20 years ago, the Long Voyage Alliance came up with the idea of Supreme. It was designed by many authoritative experts and built in 15 years. The starship is made of nanochromium porcelain and 256 yuan superalloy. It has the most excellent comprehensive starship system in the entire Godly War space zone. The starship can sail for up to 100 years on full power. It can open a space-time crack and perform a long-distance space jump, teleporting us to a space zone as far as 1,000 light-years away. Ding Ming noticed that there was a transmission array at the entrance of the passage. This transmission array was similar to a rotating glass door. Once people entered, they would be transmitted to a designated area. It was equivalent to the Chu-Ing transmission system inside the starship. After all, supremacy was too big, and its walking speed was too slow. The transmission array at the docking port directly sent them to the command center. This command center was quite special. It did not exist in the form of a traditional control panel, but was a completely empty metal hall. However, at this moment, an intelligent robot had distributed a pair of low-light glasses to each person. After putting on the glasses, Ding Ming realized that there was something special about this hall. This was a hall full of miniature probes. As long as Dong Yi and Shiwen issued an order through the glasses, the rays of these probes could assemble any image they wanted, including maps, light screens, real scenes, materialized force fields, and so on. This was many times more advanced than the control panel. As soon as Ding Meng and the others came in, all the lights in the hall lit up. The delicate and sweet voice of the Cortex system resounded in the hall. Authorization has been approved. Commander, please transmit the order. Xuan immediately stepped forward and drew in the air with a small and delicate gilded pen. A magnificent, dynamic interstellar map was immediately generated in the hall. The power of this map was not only in its scale and degree of realism, but also in the real-time movement of the entire God's War starfield through Xuan's gestures. For example, on any route, the number of fleets, what direction they were heading, how fast they were moving, and even the logo of the fleet could be seen clearly. For example, in the major areas of the God's War starfield, which places were normal space fortresses belonging to sects, which were chaotic areas where the flames of war were raging, which were underground markets for smuggling. These were all marked with different colors. This was just Sovereign's ordinary reconnaissance system, but it was so powerful that it left everyone dumbfounded. Even Xiao AI couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Even the entire special class fleet on planet Dupe can't compare to this sovereign. Ding Meng nodded. He had been watching Shi Wen's operation. Shi Wen held the gilded pen and seemed to write a series of strange symbols on the map. The Cortex system immediately said, "The coordinates now for you." At this time, the interstellar map finally changed. The entire God's War starfield became a dot of light. This dot of light was contained in a bubble shaped like two sausages. Dong, he explained. "Everyone, this is the space-time wormhole we are about to pass through. The estimated time to pass through is 8 hours, but the time to reach the destination is much longer than that. Therefore, during this time, you could do whatever you want. Supremacy has many functional areas. Please use your low-light glasses to transmit the information." When he said this, almost everyone chose the rest area. The reason was very simple. This kind of interstellar voyage was measured in months. It was impossible for everyone to eat, drink, and play on the starship for a few months. They would definitely seize the time to cultivate. With such a luxurious configuration of the Supreme, the personal rest area would definitely not be bad. In fact, Dong, he had already divided these people into individual rooms. Everyone was teleported to the corresponding cabin. These rooms were no different from the villas on the star ring. Not only were the decorations exquisite, but they also had all the necessary equipment. The rarest thing was that the nourishment cabins provided all kinds of amplification products. Ding Meng looked at the control panel in his glasses. There were hundreds of them. In terms of quality, they were all very effective amplification agents. However, Ding Meng would not touch these things. It was still the same principle. Amplification products manufactured by industrialization should be avoided as much as possible. After inspecting the facilities in the room, Ding Meng did not enter the induction cabin. With his current strength, it was meaningless for him to cultivate for a short period of time without a large amount of energy. From Xiao AI's point of view, Ding Meng hadn't even completed the beginner stage of the cultivation technique. The 10th origin was a towering mountain that lay in front of him. If he wanted to climb this mountain, it wouldn't be as simple as spending time absorbing origin energy. He would also have to rely on the blessing of the heavens. Without a good encounter, it would be impossible to complete this feat. This was because the amount of energy required to forge the 10th origin was astronomical. Ordinary energy sources could not meet this requirement. Secondly, it was a matter of time. It did not mean that it would take a lot of time, but the key was that he could not be disturbed during the cultivation. However, by the standards of the Holy Grail Federation, Ding Meng's energy had already surpassed the level of an intermediate warlord when he tempered the first 9 origins. Since coming to the God War Star Zone, Ding Meng had not met an opponent who could rival him. If he did, he would definitely use his energy to the limit. At that time, Ding Meng would still be able to compete with a battle sage. Therefore, Ding Meng chose to temper the Green Spirit Divine Tree in the beginner stage of his consciousness. The Green Spirit technique was more suitable for him at this stage because it was fundamentally different from Mao Xing's technique. Simply put, Mao Xing's technique was very sharp and domineering. Take the mind manipulation technique as an example. It used telekinesis to invade someone's brain in a simple and crude manner, causing them to suffer from selective amnesia for a short period of time. The Green Spirit Divine Tree had a simple technique called the Evergreen Illusionary Spirit Technique. It was much gentler. It used telekinesis to form a barrier between the enemy and Ding Meng. The telekinesis wall's function was camouflage. It blended in with the surrounding environment. In the eyes of the enemy, they would only see the normal environment and would not be able to see Ding Meng. To put it bluntly, it was a camouflage. Back then, the Second Fleet had not been able to see the true face of the super forest in space because of this principle. Of course, as his telekinesis improved, the camouflage effect, range of camouflage, degree of realism, and strength of shielding would all be completely different. The Evergreen Illusionary Spirit technique used by the super life form was so powerful that it could even block the quantum radars of interstellar fleets. Now, that Ding Meng was using this technique, at most, only origin ability users who were weaker than him would not be able to see it. In short, the Green Spirit technique was a complete system that could be gradually strengthened through cultivation. Mao Xing's technique, on the other hand, could not be done. It was more simplistic and had higher requirements. Of course, Ding Meng could not possibly neglect Mao Xing's technique. He practiced both techniques in the beginner stage of his consciousness at the same time. However, it was obviously not realistic for him to be alone in peace. When he sensed that the roots had just materialized into 10 or so tentacles, his low-light glasses immediately flashed. The lenses showed that there were 2 new communication requests. On the Supreme, this kind of communication was an instant transmission of music images. It could only be done with the permission of the person being requested. Ding Meng glanced at the information on the lenses and sighed silently. Xiao AI was also a little unhappy. These women are so troublesome. 2 white pillars of light were generated in the room. A moment later, Jun Ling and Lu Qing appeared beside the sofa at the same time. Why is it you again? Jun Ling did not feel any hostility towards Lu Qing. She always felt that this woman was always pestering Ding Meng, so she did not have much time to ask for advice from Ding Meng. So it's Miss Jun. You and Ding Meng are inseparable. Lu Qing's words had a hint of jealousy in them. The woman of steel had always been one-track minded. She could not be bothered to pay attention to her. She directly said to Ding Meng, "Do you have any techniques for the Green Spirit Divine Tree?" Ding Meng asked curiously, "Why do you say that?" Jun Ling frowned and said, "I just ate my 3 fruits. There are some things I don't understand, so I still have to ask you." Ding Meng suddenly remembered that before she left the Azure Tree Star, Ling Yun had given 3 divine fruits to Jun Ling. The queen was a member of the royal family, so the things she gave must be extraordinary. Could it be that it included the blue spirit spell? Do you know how to transmit thoughts now? Ding Meng asked. Jun Ling replied disdainfully, "I already knew. It's a piece of cake." When she said that, Lu Qing was surprised. Could it be that Jun Ling was also a warlock? Lu Qing quietly operated her telekinesis and quietly established a spiritual link. At this moment, Ding Meng and Jun Ling both turned their heads in surprise. Jun Ling was surprised because this was the first time she had seen the magical use of a spiritual link. Ding Meng was surprised because he found that this triangular link actually had an additional function. Not only could the transmission of telepathic thoughts be interconnected, but the 3 of them seemed to be unaffected by the starship's gravity system. They actually floated up lightly. What's going on? Jun Ling curiously found herself floating in the air. Lu Qing smiled. This is also the effect of a spiritual link. Different warlocks and different schools can combine their telekinesis to produce other effects. It's like a chemical reaction. They can also help each other. As she explained, she transmitted information to Jun Ling. Jun Ling almost instantly understood the principle of a spiritual link. In her senses, there seemed to be an invisible telekinesis force field between the 3 of them. With the help of the energy of this force field, they could float. However, when she turned her gaze to Ding Meng, she was not very happy. This was because Ding Ming's telekinesis was obviously much higher than the two of them. Ding Ming was also floating in the room, but he was flashing back and forth in the air. Those who did not know would think that this was a light-speed martial art. Lu Qing secretly opened up the Link Authority. This time, Junling looked at her in a new light. This woman not only taught her spells, but also trusted her. Junling said in surprise, "Sister Lu Qing is actually close to the level of a spirit general." Lu Qing was even more surprised. Miss Jun's psionic power and telekinesis. This is completely universal. Chapter 484. In the center of the room, Ding Ming, Junling, and Lu Qing sat down cross-legged, forming a triangle. It could be clearly seen in the telekinesis vision that, with the activation of the three people's telekinesis, this triangle produced a brilliant and colorful force field. The telekinesis of this force field was mainly led by Ding Ming and assisted by Lu Qing and Junling. In an extremely short period of time, a materialized green spirit divine tree was created. This was the most basic telekinesis model. This was the magical effect of the mind link. It could gather the power of the three people and rapidly increase their telekinesis. At the same time, it could also feed back to the three people. It could impart the green spirit techniques that Ding Ming had already learned to the other two people, while Lu Qing and Junling could also work together to help Ding Ming create the model. The one who benefited the most was Junling, because she was constantly receiving Ding Ming and Lu Qing's techniques. Lu Qing's mind link could also help her absorb origin energy. Through this divine tree model, Lu Qing could help Junling expand her telekinesis vision, increasing her absorption efficiency. After Junling consumed the divine fruit, she also gained telekinesis vision. However, this was not the multi-dimensional vision of the general telekinesis, but the three-dimensional vision of the kinetic telekinesis. It was only a simple length, width, and height, but this was enough. Junling could not see the origin energy stars, but she could feel them by absorbing them herself. Xiao AI could not help but sigh. Telekinesis really needs to be interconnected in many ways to grow quickly. I still underestimated this mind link. Ding Ming nodded. He now understood this principle. This mind link was the simplest and easiest technique to learn. However, it was not simple because the more one practiced it and the more proficient they were at it, the better the effects would be. For example, with Lu Qing's proficiency level, it could actually induce a model to feed back, interconnect in many ways, and cultivate together in pairs. Of course, Junling's strength was slightly lower. In her current state, it was not suitable for her to accept Ding Ming's help. If Ding Ming helped her expand her horizons, it would be like pulling a seedling to help it grow. As time passed, Ding Ming gradually solidified the roots of the green spirit heavenly tree in his elementary consciousness space. At this moment, a miraculous scene appeared. The shadowy figure by the seaside suddenly turned around. The crystal clear water droplet actually left his palm and slowly flew towards the heavenly tree. It hung at the top of the heavenly tree, as if it was absorbing the energy of the heavenly tree. Not long after, the water droplet finally began to change. It slowly unfolded like a ray of light, forming an illusory human figure. Ding Ming found it somewhat familiar. When he took a closer look, he realized that it was Big Brother Zheng Ming. "You?" Ding Ming was shocked. "What's going on?" "Hello, Ding Ming." The light shadow actually spoke, and its voice was exactly the same as Zheng Ming's. "You've evolved?" Ding Ming seemed to have realized something. The silhouette nodded. "Yes, you evolved me." Ding Ming asked, "Did I evolve you?" The silhouette said, "Not only is there a variety of energy in your body, but it's also very abundant. It's already enough for me to evolve to the first stage." Ding Ming stared at it and said, "But why did you evolve into this form?" The silhouette said, "That's because I've also read part of your memories. I chose one of the targets based on the experiences provided by your memories as a reference." Ding Ming said, "You can read my memories?" The silhouette said, "No, but I know everything you've experienced since the expedition. During this period, you often recall many things in the past. In these memories, there are many people who had a great impact on you. As long as you can remember them, I can see them. Strictly speaking, these people and things will also become my memories. The silhouette waved its hand as it spoke. Ding Ming immediately felt a subtle transmission of telepathic thoughts. This silhouette could actually use telekinesis too. In these telepathic thoughts, many images flashed past Ding Ming's eyes. Brother Zheng Ming's sacrifice, Mr. Yu's burning of life, the little girl's turning into an ice sculpture, the bracelet that little four played with all year long, Xing's defying dodging, Silman's unwavering determination. Among these people, Zheng Ming's image was the clearest and most prominent, because Zheng Ming's tragic death had always been a dark cloud in Ding Ming's heart. It had always stimulated him to work harder and reminded him not to forget. The silhouette explained, because the thing you miss the most is the time when you, brother Zheng Ming, and sister when he relied on each other to survive. It occupies your most precious memory. Brother Zheng Ming is also the most important person in your heart, so I chose him as my image. Ding Ming could not help but ask, "Why did you choose him?" The silhouette said, "Because you and your experiences affect me. Objectively speaking, I'm both your soul and your inner demon." Ding Ming obviously did not understand this. The silhouette could not help but say, "Actually, the core system can explain it for you." Xiao AI was surprised. "You know of my existence?" The silhouette said proudly, "You underestimate me. The power of the spore race is far beyond what you intelligent programs can imagine." Xiao AI smiled bitterly. "You are indeed a water droplet. The way you talk is exactly the same as Chu Ming Liang." The silhouette said, "Chu Ming Liang? I know him." Xiao AI was surprised. "You remember what happened on the expedition?" The silhouette said, "Of course I know." Xiao AI was stunned. "You know?" "Then why did you?" The silhouette interrupted her. "I saw it from Ding Ming's memories, but I don't like that form of me." Xiao AI was curious. "Why?" The silhouette said, "It's simple. Because I was greatly influenced by Ding Ming during this period. I was reborn, and my life began a new journey. I also want to experience a different life journey, like the light bird. The universe is vast, and I want to explore it." Ding Ming frowned. "What is a soul? What is an inner demon?" The silhouette explained, "The images, people, and events you've seen above are all part of your mind, the God in your heart, your beliefs, and your pursuits. They have a decisive influence on you, urging you to become stronger, more positive, and more positive. What about an inner demon?" Ding Ming asked curiously. "What is an inner demon? Do I have an inner demon too?" The silhouette said, "Of course you do, and there are many of them." Ding Ming asked, "Then what is it?" The silhouette said, "Are you sure you want to see?" Ding Ming said, "Let me see." "Okay." The silhouette was straightforward and transmitted a telepathic message. The images contained in this message were completely different from the previous ones. The first one was the children in the square of the black gold base. They were mercilessly whipped by Sadler's whip, trampled by countless laborers, and fought and killed in the underground mining area. These were all memories that could trigger one's violent emotions. The image changed. What appeared in front of Ding Ming was the living room of a villa in the Flying Star City. Dai Yi's long legs and black stockings swayed in front of his eyes, and he immediately felt a burning sensation in his lower abdomen. The image changed again. This time, he could not see anything, but he could smell a sweet, hurried breath and hear the enchanting moans in the darkness. Other people might not know what was going on, but Ding Ming had experienced it before. This person was definitely Lan Bing. "Enough!" Ding Ming blushed and hurriedly stopped it. The silhouette said, "These are your inner demons. Although you don't think about them often, they still have a deep influence on you. Do you understand now?" Ding Ming nodded. "I understand. But what's the use of these?" The silhouette replied, "Of course it's useful. It's up to you to decide whether you're inclined towards the positive or the evil path. Not only will it affect you, it will also affect me. I'm currently attached to you, so I'll naturally help you." Ding Ming asked, "How can you help me?" The silhouette said, "Your positive mentality has a great advantage. Why don't you activate the psychic model in the room and try to infuse the telepathic message I've transmitted to you into it, and then activate it?" Ding Meng did as he was told. The model of the sacred tree suddenly flashed coldly, as if a human-shaped mirror image of Zheng Ming had appeared. The mirror image swung its saber backward and slashed at the air. This process was very short, probably less than 0.1 seconds, but it still startled the two beauties beside him. Did something flash just now? Ding Ming was still very sensitive. Lu Qing was confused. "I don't think I saw anything." The silhouette continued to explain, "I'm still very weak now, so I can only have such a weak effect." Ding Ming said, "I understand. This is the effect of the mind. But what about the inner demons? You almost have no inner demons now." The silhouette seemed to know that this effect was not easy to show, so he simply asked directly, "You remember Lan Bing, right?" Of course Ding Ming remembered. Not only did he remember, but he also had a deep impression of her. The silhouette said, "You should have a deep impression of her when she had sex with you, right?" Well, Ding Ming was a little embarrassed. "I think so." The silhouette said, "You don't have to deny it. Even if you want to deny it, you should admit that the feeling was very wonderful, right?" Ding Ming said with a sullen face, "What exactly are you trying to say?" The silhouette said, "Once you lose your mind, you will do some unreasonable things. For example, this Lu Qing in front of you. You can't wait to hold her down and then violently ravage her. My function is to make her unable to resist at all, and I can also instill some very bad thoughts in her so that she will cooperate with you." Ding Ming's eyelids drooped. "I understand. Let's forget about that." The silhouette said, "There is one more thing I want to tell you. Before I have the ability to leave you, I will help you strictly according to the instructions of the auxiliary system. As for how I help, it depends on your mind and inner demons." Hearing this, Xiao AI was shocked beyond words. "The auxiliary system can command you?" The silhouette said, "When I was beaten back to my original form, almost all of my memories were wiped away. However, the instructions left behind by Ding Ming's imprint on his forehead were not removed." Ding Ming was also dumbfounded when he heard this. He did not expect Little Rascal to be so powerful. Back then, even when his spiritual body had died, it could still impose such a punishment on the water droplet. The strength of the Mao Xing civilization was really amazing. However, the silhouette took the initiative to change back to its water droplet form and return to the virtual shadow's hand. "All right, Ding Ming, I'll leave you for now. You have things to do now." Ding Ming also heard it. The voice of the mastermind's system rang out in the room. "All crew members, please take note. The ship is about to arrive at the destination. All crew members, please return to the command center in 30 minutes. Chapter 485. Ding Ming withdrew the telepathic link and asked, "We've arrived so soon?" Xiao AI said, "Not at all. 156 days, 20 hours, and 35 minutes have passed." Ding Ming sighed helplessly. As long as he was cultivating, almost half a year would pass without him noticing, and the progress was not that great. "We've been sailing for 5 months. It doesn't seem too far away," Ding Ming said. Xiao AI said, "It's already very far away. It's so far that I can't calculate the distance." Ding Ming was surprised. "Oh, there's something that even you can't calculate?" Xiao AI said, "The designer of this supremacy is actually very skilled. Even I can't completely hack into the database. The defenses of the Cortex Prime system are extremely tight. I can only calculate the distance through the voyage event recorder." Ding Ming frowned and asked, "How far is it?" Xiao AI said, "In the past 5 months, Shi Wan and Dong Ia performed a total of 3 space jumps, 12 medium and long-distance space transmissions, and as many as 29 short-distance space transmissions. Now, we've truly entered the normal navigation mode. I estimate that we should be in the star sector 2,000 light-years away. For main star system, this distance was completely negligible. However, for the humans in the God War star sector, This was a terrifying distance. Not only was it far away, but it also meant that supremacy had left the support range of the superfleet. After flying to this star sector, it was like a leaf drifting into the depths of the sea. It would no longer be isolated and helpless, and it would face all kinds of unknown dangers. It could only rely on itself. Dingming was also silent for a while. He understood why Xiao AI collected this data. Dong Yi clearly said that the space jump would take 8 hours, but the actual operation was completely different. This proved that Dong Yi and Shiwen were deliberately concealing the coordinates of their destination. Of course, Dingming did not believe that the two big shots were playing tricks since they had come so far. He was more inclined to another guess, which was that this destination was probably very hidden. Shiwen and Dong He did not want to expose the whereabouts of the Supreme Ship. At this moment, Junling and Lu Qing also withdrew their telepathic link. The two of them were completely different from Ding Meng's calmness. The two of them complemented each other's cultivation, and both of them made rapid progress. Their faces were flushed red, and their bodies were drenched in sweat. Their expressions could not help but cause one's imagination to run wild. Lu Qing saw that Ding Meng was staring at her upper body in a daze. She was so scared that she quickly jumped up. "I'm going to take a shower. I'll be back later." Junling rolled his eyes at Ding Meng. "How bored are you?" Ding Meng woke up from his contemplation. "Am I very bored?" "Nonsense." The straightforward woman dared to say anything. "She's not wearing any undergarments, and her outer clothes are wet. You really know how to choose a place to stare." Ding Meng was speechless. She had already run away, and he did not see anything. How could he get shot while lying down? At the same time, in the command hall, most people immediately returned after receiving the notice. At this time, the interstellar map had been upgraded to a huge real-time image. What appeared in front of everyone was a magnificent star system. This star system was very similar to the K8 star system in the K star system. This was because there were 7 huge sun stars in this star system. They were red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple respectively, making the entire star system look colorful and beautiful. Shiwen said calmly, "We will temporarily name this place the Rainbow Star System." For a moment, there was a lot of discussion. Ding Meng thought that this Rainbow Star System was probably not a good place. This was because he knew that in the vast universe, those dark and uninhabited remote depths were actually very safe. It was precisely those dazzling and beautiful star systems that were more dangerous because their bright appearance confused your eyes, making you unable to see the hidden dangers. Lu Qing and Junling also came into the command hall at this time. Shiwen began to enlarge the image. Ding Meng noticed that in addition to the 7 sun stars, there were 53 other planets in the Rainbow Star System. They were evenly distributed everywhere and seemed to be orbiting the sun stars. The map showed that the Rainbow Star System was about 16 light years in diameter. Of course, this was not a large star system. However, Shiwen explained, "We discovered this place 4 years ago. For this reason, we used 2 fleets, but in the end, only 1 mothership successfully returned." She did not explain the reason for the loss of the 2 fleets, but everyone knew that she must have a reason. As she moved the light-plated pen in her hand, the map mode was switched to simulation mode. The major planets in the Rainbow Star System began to move at double speed, which was a revolution of the star system. Soon, everyone's expression changed. This was because everyone saw that there was a huge problem with the revolution of the planets in the Rainbow Star System. On the surface, it looked like all the planets were revolving around the largest fiery red sun star in the center. However, after a few revolutions, the system's cursor pointed to an inconspicuous small planet. This was because the truth was that all the planets were actually revolving around this planet. The revolution was 3.5 revolutions, and the cycle of 1 revolution was 20 years. Everyone present was an expert and knew what this meant. Ming Huaji's eyes widened. "This is absolutely impossible." Shiwen sighed softly. "When I first saw the results of the calculation, I felt the same as Mr. Ming. I also felt that it was impossible. Ming Huaji hesitated. Was there a mistake in the calculation? Dong Yi explained, not only did the Cortex Prime system calculate this result 5 times, but CEO Shi and I also repeatedly calculated it 23 times to confirm that this is the result. There is no mistake. In the universe, planets usually revolved around stars. How could a star revolve around a planet? Because a star was large and had high mass, its gravitational force could attract planets smaller than it. However, the scene in front of them completely violated the principles of mechanics. The small planet attracted the star instead. This meant that the density of this dark planet was ridiculously high. However, a planet with such a high density could no longer be called a planet. It was a collapsed black hole. Only a black hole could violate so many laws of physics. However, if this planet was a black hole, then everything around it would be swallowed up, including light and time. However, the rainbow star system was operating normally. Ming Huaji seemed to have thought of something. His expression suddenly became aghast. An alien civilization? Shu did not answer. He continued to change the mode. Now, he switched to the reconnaissance mode. All the planets were displayed in two-dimensional motion pictures. At the same time, Dong Yi took the initiative to explain, we are not using quantum detection now. Quantum detection cannot detect anything at all. We're using a photonic-like radar. It can effectively detect hidden things. As soon as he finished speaking, the strange little planet suddenly emitted a slight fluctuation. Everyone was very familiar with this feeling. It was just like sensing the energy fluctuations of another person's body. A wave of air spread out in front of them. Of course, this was the starship's radar. This kind of fluctuation was the energy fluctuation detected by the radar. This kind of fluctuation could be a very pure crystal, or a pure natural inverse source crystal, or a very high-grade silver core, or... In short, no matter what it was, the radar had locked onto its position. On the screen, the value of this fluctuation was 530 million plus megadai. Shiwen suddenly said, when our God War Star Ring is in operation, the value of energy consumed per day is 2,500 plus megadai. It consumed 2,500 units per day, which was around 910,000 units per year. Then, in 72 years, it would require at least 65 million units of energy. However, the fluctuation in front of them had a value of 3 units. What kind of terrifying existence was this? Everyone was shocked. What kind of secret was hidden on this strange planet? In fact, many people thought about it. From the perspective of the laws of physics, this rainbow star system could not exist at all. The probability of such a star system being born in the universe was infinitely close to 0. However, it did exist, so there was only one possibility left. This place was probably the work of a god-level civilization. Because the radar information was clear at a glance, there were no signs of life on any of the planets in the rainbow star system, not even plants. This was especially true for that small planet. Its diameter was less than 7,000 kilometers, and the ground was all scorched earth and rubble. Xiao AI said, that's not right. If there are such powerful energy fluctuations, why is the ground so bleak? Dingming nodded and said, I'm afraid that what we are seeing is not the real picture. Previously, on the Azure Tree Star, the super life form had already taught the starships of the God War Alliance a lesson, which was that some planets had an automatic camouflage effect. Shiwen continued, for years ago, when we discovered this place, we were alarmed by this fluctuation. Therefore, we examined the star system and discovered these strange phenomena. Everyone's task this time is to figure out what kind of planet this is. If it has the resources we want, how should we excavate them? Shiwen nodded and said, that's right. Hearing this, everyone fell silent. Was this mission difficult? It didn't seem difficult at all. It was nothing more than going down to that uninhabited planet to search. But in fact, everyone knew that this mission was extremely risky because they knew nothing about the situation on this planet. God knows what was hidden below. At this time, a red light suddenly flashed in the command center. Shiwen and Dong Yi's faces turned cold at the same time. This was a signal for reconnaissance in warning. The photon radar on the Supreme was really not a joke. It immediately searched for potential threats. In the outer space of the Rainbow Star System, a flat starship with a sturgeon-like appearance appeared. This was also a huge starship. Visually, its size was even higher than the Supreme, but it was made of an unknown material. It seemed that the sturgeon-like starship was trying to enter the Rainbow Star System. "Dong," he said decisively. "We are now in a state of stealth. They can't find us." Shuan understood what he meant. Let's wait and see. Everyone was also discussing spiritedly. From the data fed back by the radar, it could be seen that this was definitely not a starship of the human civilization. The only question now was the sturgeon-like starship also aiming for that small planet? Chapter 486. On the radar screen, the speed of the sturgeon was extremely fast, and the way it flew was very special. At first, it was just floating in the outer area of the galaxy, but as soon as it entered the galaxy, it didn't seem to notice any danger, and its speed suddenly increased. It didn't feel like a starship, but a real fish swimming rapidly in various postures in the water. It could be said that it was impossible for a normal starship to be so flexible in space, and it was impossible for it to make such difficult flight movements. It was already out of the category of a starship, because in the data stream fed back by the radar, the sturgeon didn't have any energy fluctuations. This reason was very simple. No matter what you were, to be able to fly in the universe, you needed power. Whether it was crystal energy, ion propulsion, or even space transmission, there would be energy fluctuations when you made these movements. However, the information sent back by the radar was that the sturgeon didn't have any energy, no energy fluctuations, and no energy diffusion. Shuan and Dong, couldn't help but look at each other, and their eyes were full of shock. If this technology was compared with the Supreme, it was still uncertain which was stronger, but this technology was never seen in the War of Gods League. "Look, did it start space transmission?" Su Lingwei exclaimed. Everyone focused their gazes again and found that the sturgeon had suddenly disappeared in a flash. Shuan hurriedly operated the map and found that the sturgeon hadn't disappeared. Instead, it had teleported a large distance forward in a flash. It had actually passed the outermost planet. "Dong," he said in a deep voice, "it's avoiding the meteorite belt." The sturgeon soon showed Ding Meng and the others the never-before-seen space transmission technology. It didn't just flash, but flashed in many places in the galaxy. Strictly speaking, this was not space transmission, but space flashing, but the effect was the same. Although the frequency of flashing was very high and the locations were very messy, everyone could still see that the general direction of the sturgeon was faintly pointing to that strange small planet. In other words, its goal was the same as the Supreme. Shuan's face suddenly tightened. "Let's follow it." "Dong," he immediately said, "we can't follow." Shuan said, "If we don't follow, they will beat us to it." "Dong," he said decisively, "it's too risky for us to follow them. At the very least, we know nothing about the situation on the other side." Shuan said, "We have to follow. It's already not easy for us to come here again. We can't pay such a high price and return empty-handed." Dong, he was silent. How could he not understand this logic? The Alliance had spent a lot of resources to create this sovereign, and its manufacturing process meant that it was destined to be different from ordinary starships. It could not be used in space in a cowardly manner. By the same logic, how could the other starships that could reach this place be unorthodox? The dark law of the universe made it impossible for two families to coexist peacefully. Shuan closed his eyes. Remove the camouflage and use short-distance spatial transmission to send a signal to the other side. According to my calculations, there's at least a 70% chance that the battle will not start. She was a data master. Since she dared to come to such a conclusion, Dong, he could only give Catherine a look. Carry out President Xi's orders. In the dark space, the transparent energy layer camouflage on the exterior of the Sovereign slowly faded away, revealing its huge body. At the same time, the green light on the two wings flashed, and halos spread out. As soon as the Sovereign appeared, The sturgeon in front immediately returned to its normal sailing speed. They had obviously discovered the existence of the sovereign. Catherine also exclaimed. They responded. Everyone's spirits were lifted. They all looked at the newly formed time screen. Symbols appeared on the screen. These symbols were very special. They were all circles, but inside and outside of each circle, there were different straight-line cursors. Some were inserted, some were barbed, some were arranged, and some were overlapped. The most complicated circle even had 20 to 30 cursors on it. It was clearly some kind of text. Dong, he said in a deep voice, open the translation system and compare. Catherine was surprised. I can't recognize it. There are no samples to compare. This is the language of an unknown civilization. Dong, he looked at Ming Huaji. Old Ming, can you see what this text is? Ming Huaji narrowed his eyes and carefully observed for a long time before saying, this should be some kind of Xingyi script. Dong, he said, Old Ming, can you translate it? Ming Huaji shook his head helplessly. Sorry, I can't understand what it means. Dong, he was about to ask again when a deep voice suddenly sounded from behind. This is a warning. Everyone turned their heads in surprise and found that the speaker was Ding Ming. Dong, he was surprised. Brother Ding, you can recognize these words? Ding Ming said in a deep voice. The meaning of these words is that they hope we can keep a safe distance from each other. It's best if we don't disturb each other. Sheng Tianming looked at him suspiciously. Really? You're not blindly guessing here, are you? However, at this time, no one paid attention to him. Kataga took the initiative to speak. We are now 900 billion kilometers away from the other party. This is indeed a safe distance. 900 billion kilometers was about 1 light years. The ordinary weapons on the starship could not reach this range. Even if some special weapons could, this distance was enough for the other party to react. At this time, another row of strangely shaped circles appeared on the screen. Xuan hurriedly asked, what does it say this time? Ding Ming said, if your target is also that planet, we suggest that you use the planet as a cover and stay in opposite positions. The command center fell silent again. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. The other party clearly knew the purpose of each other's visit and had already guessed that they had come because of this strange phenomenon. Xuan said agreed. Catherine quickly responded on the screen. 10 seconds later, another row of short circles appeared on the screen. This time, Xuan did not even have to ask. Ding Ming took the initiative to translate. Thank you for your cooperation. This seemed like a polite sentence, but everyone was now clear on one thing. They could not recognize the other party's information, but the other party was familiar with the human language. This was not a good sign. Dong, he said, slow down and follow behind them. If they're using normal flight mode, we'll use normal mode. If they're using spatial transmission, we'll follow suit. It sounded like they were getting along peacefully, but they were actually wary of the other party. After all, neither side knew the depth of the other party's strength. Rashly attacking would do them no good. Lu Qing secretly established a telepathic link. Ding Ming, what kind of language are these strange symbols? Ding Ming sighed. I can't explain it to you in a short time. You'll know in the future. It wasn't that he didn't trust Lu Qing, but it was a long story. This circular language was the language of the frogs in the Saint Brilliance Federation, which was the so-called Frogman Nation. The God War Starfield might be confused about it, but Ding Ming definitely recognized it. At least in the Norse Empire, the language of the Frogman Nation was a language that every soldier of the Empire had to learn. This was because the war between the Empire and the Frogmen had never stopped. These circular characters looked simple, but they were actually very complicated. Not only did they form meaning, but they also formed sound. The rows of circles were still normal, but once they changed, it meant that the Frogmen were declaring war. The Frogmen had always been seen as monsters by humans. However, after going to the verdant tree planet, Ding Ming learned from the super life form that the Frogmen were actually a branch of the green spirit race. They were part of the green beasts. The super life form also said that the verdant tree planet, the Divine Wars Starfield, and Madison Planet all had the same origin. This meant that the Frogmen who were piloting this sturgeon were actually the same as Ding Ming. The Divine Wars Starfield was slightly special. As for what was special about it, the super life form didn't explain it in detail. There was probably some other explanation. Therefore, in this situation, Ding Ming couldn't explain the twists and turns of the story to everyone. Even if he did, no one would believe him. The biggest change brought about by the decrease in the speed of the two starships was the time. At this speed, it would take at least 2 to 3 years to reach the small planet. However, with the Sturgeon in front and Supreme behind, Shuan didn't dare to rashly overtake them. Suddenly, Catherine shouted, "The enemy has entered stealth mode." Everyone took a closer look. The surface of the Sturgeon was gradually turning black. The starship was originally black, but now it was even darker. It had completely merged with the darkness of the universe. Of course, in Supreme's photon radar, it was always a red color. Shuan said, "This is elementary camouflage. Their stealth technology isn't developed enough." Dong, he frowned. "But something's not right. They're getting slower and slower. Are they turning off their engines?" The radar showed that the speed of the Sturgeon was lower than the third cosmic speed. This speed was even affected by the gravitational force of the galaxy. Dong, he suddenly thought of something. They've entered stealth mode, turned off the boosters, and changed the power system to floating mode. There had to be a reason for this. In the colorful starry sky, Supreme also disappeared like a miracle. About half an hour later, the entire command center flashed red again. This time, it wasn't a sudden flash, but a high-frequency pulsation, indicating the existence of an extremely dangerous threat. The benefits of the photon radar were reflected at this time. Through the time curtain, they could clearly see that in the depths of the vast universe, an extremely large fleet was flying rapidly. Catherine looked back at Dong. This isn't a fleet from the Divine War starfield. It's only 7 light years away from us. Their destination is exactly where we are now. There was almost no need to guess. This fleet was definitely coming for the small planet. No one who could sail to this barren land was easy to deal with. Dong, he smiled bitterly. "This is great. I thought this location was very remote. I didn't expect it to be so lively." Chapter 487. There were a total of 7 fleets flying towards them at high speed. They were all silver gray in color and had a long, narrow, and heavy shape. They looked like Skywalker assault ships, but they were definitely not assault ships. They were more than enough to crush assault ships in terms of size. However, one thing was certain. These were definitely starships from the human world, because the design of these starships was in line with the concepts of many human engineers, and there was a laser coating on the starships, 2 sharp daggers crossed together by a steel ring. Seeing this logo, Ding Ming let out a long sigh. Seeing him like this, Lu Qing secretly asked, "Seems like you know where these fleets come from?" Ding Ming's voice trembled slightly. "They're from the Norse Empire." Lu Qing understood his thoughts. Seeing the Norse Empire's fleet, Ding Ming undoubtedly had hope of returning. While everyone was nervously watching the central screen, Lu Qing quietly came up behind Ding Ming. "I have an idea." Ding Ming asked, "What idea?" Lu Qing pondered for a long time before saying, "If you want to return to your original world, can you take me with you?" Ding Ming turned around in surprise. "You're one of the leaders of Water Cherry Society." Lu Qing didn't answer. She just quietly stared at Ding Ming. Sometimes, words were superfluous. Eyes were enough to say everything. This scene was familiar to Ding Ming, because Little Four had looked at him with such hopeful and trusting eyes before he died. Facing such a pair of eyes, Ding Ming sighed. "As long as we can survive, I'll take you with me." Lu Qing didn't smile. She could feel the weight of Ding Ming's words. In this complicated situation, everyone would have to take a big risk. At this time, the Imperial fleet was already approaching the asteroid. The 7 starships were lined up in a row, but strangely, the fleet didn't seem to show any signs of landing. They just floated in space. There was another round of discussion. They clearly didn't know what the enemy's intentions were. The Supreme and Sturgeon were in an awkward situation. They didn't dare to show themselves, nor did they dare to move. Catherine suddenly turned around. "Sir, there's a remote instant communication request for us." Dong, he sighed. "If you can make a request, it means that you have already discovered us. Let's bring them in." Multiple probes shot out rays from the sky above the command center, simulating 3 small podiums in the middle of the hall. The 3 podiums stood in a triangular formation. This quantum communication was obviously to establish a real-time connection between the 3 families. Xiwen said to Dong, Chief Dong, it's better if I go in. Dong Yi understood what she meant. After all, Xiwen was a woman. She could more or less reduce the other party's hostility. After Catherine fiddled with the screen for a while, Xiwen's image was transmitted to the communication simulation field. After Xiwen stood on the podium on the right, a mirror image immediately appeared on the podium on the top. Unexpectedly, the mirror image of the other party was also a beautiful woman. Moreover, it was a young woman with bright eyes and white teeth. She looked bright, confident, generous, and moving. She always had a smile on her face that made people feel happy. Everyone's first impression was that this woman shouldn't be wearing a military uniform. She should be wearing sportswear. Only sportswear matched her temperament. Hello, the young woman greeted first. At the same time, she introduced herself. This is the Norse Empire's V-15T-30XM 20 Special Operations Fleet. The Norse Empire was definitely a new name to most of the people present, and Xiwen was no exception. Thus, she carefully replied, Hello, same kind. This is the Supreme of the Divine Battlefield. The other party was still smiling without any change in expression. It was obvious that the representative of the Empire knew nothing about the Divine Battlefield. In this kind of situation, being able to introduce oneself was already quite friendly. At the very least, the other party was not hostile. The young woman's eyes fell on the podium on the left. Not long after, a third mirror image appeared. This was the first time everyone had seen the legendary black frog race. It was a standing frog. Its body was larger than a normal human's, about 5 meters tall. Its legs were abnormally well-developed, and its eyes were especially large. They were embedded in the top of its head, looking like 2 black and red crystal balls. The biggest characteristic of the black frog race was the effective combination of biotechnology and mechanical technology. Thus, the frog representative's body was embedded with all kinds of alloy steel plates and mechanical devices. It looked like a half-biological, half-mechanical monster. In addition, its skin was a very dark brown color. The first impression it gave people was that it was one of those ferocious monsters from the depths of the universe. The frog representative made a strange sound as soon as it appeared. The black frogs were different from humans. Humans use their mouths to make sounds, while the black frogs use sound waves from their stomachs to transmit information. As for how it worked, no one knew. Fortunately, this communication channel was built by the Norse Empire. There must be a translation system on it. The strange sound was immediately translated into human speech. Why is it you guys again? How long are you going to keep pestering us? The young woman smiled and said, Officer Dennett, we are obviously following the exploration ship. No one is pestering anyone. Dennett shouted, Shameless. We're the ones who are leading the way, but you're following us secretly. The young woman was not angry. She continued, Now let me tell you a very bad news. On our way here, the Federation's fleet, the world-devouring Zergs, and the Steel Mane Empire's fleet have already encountered us. This happened 3 months ago. Please reconsider. Ding Ming thought to himself. What the hell is the Steel Mane Empire? How come I have never heard of them when I was in the Federal Empire? When did they appear? However, although the young woman's words were simple, there was a lot of information in them. In other words, other than the 3 parties on his side that were targeting the Rainbow Clan, there were 3 other parties that were on their way here. Listening to her tone, the other 3 parties would definitely fight after encountering them. Although this happened 3 months ago, 3 months was really a blink of an eye for a long interstellar journey. Dennett calmed down as expected. His huge eyes kept flashing. I'm afraid all 3 parties have been defeated and injured, right? The young woman said, Officer Dennett, I advise you not to have such unrealistic thoughts. You should know the consequences of any of them arriving here. Also, I don't need to say more about which party will arrive first, right? Ding Ming thought that the first to arrive would definitely be the Holy Grail Federation's fleet, because whether it was technology or origin energy, the Federation was far stronger than the world-devouring Zergs. As for the Steel Main Empire, Ding Ming believed that at least in the Federation star field, the Holy Grail Federation was not inferior to anyone. She did not speak, but her brain was calculating rapidly. Even with the size of the Empire's fleet, they were afraid of the three parties behind them. It seemed that there were many strong people who coveted this place. She instantly understood why the other party requested an instant communication. "Sir, are you hoping that the three families in front of us will join forces?" "Correct," the young woman praised. "But the alliance I propose is not to form a combined fleet to fight against the people behind us. It is for everyone to seize the time to explore the planet and leave before the people behind us arrive to avoid casualties and reduce losses." In fact, this was what she won and the others were thinking. On the God's War Star Ring, Supreme was indeed a big deal, but in this universe it was nothing. Not to mention other things, at least 7 starships from the Norse Empire could fly here. This was very clear. At the very least, the God's War Alliance could not do this. Now that the Empire's fleet proposed an alliance, Shiwen immediately responded, "Agreed." However, Dennett shouted, "No, I have to ask my superiors for instructions on this matter." The young woman was still smiling, but her smile was a little cold. "Officer Dennett, your army has fought with us many times. Seeing that we are all frontline soldiers, the colonel does not want to make things difficult for you. If you insist on not accepting the alliance, then we feel that there is no need to keep you here. After all, you are redundant here." This was a classic example of immediately turning hostile and threatening after failing to rope him in. Dennett's eyes flashed with a strong light. After pondering for a moment, he sighed. "Okay, I accept the alliance, but I have a condition. It is best for the three of us to keep a certain distance and not get too close. This is for our own good, and of course for your own good." "Agreed." Shiwen agreed with this condition. The threat of the 7 starships from the Norse Empire was too great. What if they suddenly changed their mind? The young woman smiled. "No problem." As soon as she finished speaking, the image disappeared, and the instant communication was disconnected. Dong Yi immediately said, "Should we speed up?" Shiwen said in a low voice, "I suggest that we don't go forward. Let's just follow behind them and see what happens." Ding Ming thought that this Shiwen was really experienced. He could already tell that the Frogman Sturgeon starship must have taken a lot of effort to get here. Moreover, he believed that the Frogmen had more than one starship before they set off. Something must have happened along the way, so there was only one left. The Empire's fleet definitely did not want to fight either. If they fought now, it would be disadvantageous for all three parties. Even if they won, they would not gain anything. The young woman was worried about the Federation's fleet arriving later. On the other hand, it meant that this small planet was not as easy to explore as they thought. They would definitely have to pay a price. While he was deep in thought, the starships of the 3 families approached different parts of the atmosphere. The first to move would definitely be the North Star Empire's fleet. The starships lined up in a row opened their bottom plates and released their spaceships one by one. This was one of the Empire's best exploration spaceships. Ding Ming had been on one before, so he knew the capabilities of this spaceship. The 7 spaceships descended towards the ground. As soon as they broke through the atmosphere, they fell vertically. In the blink of an eye, they turned into dots of light, and then there was no more. "What's going on?" Dong Yi was shocked. The Empire's exploration spaceships had disappeared from the radar map. Catherine was also very surprised. The 7 exploration spaceships were clearly fine, but as they flew, it was as if they were under a spell. They did not encounter any attacks, nor did they change course. They just disappeared into thin air. Not to mention the crowd, even the experienced Dong Yi was seeing this kind of strange phenomenon for the first time. Chapter 488. When the Imperial fleet moved, the Frogmen did not want to be left behind. The fin on the right side of the Sturgeon's head opened, and a black object floated down silently. What is this? Dong, he was really surprised because he had never seen such a device before. It was a spherical steel ball. Its size was so small that it was almost invisible on the radar. However, when it was thrown into the atmosphere, perhaps due to the friction in the air, it began to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it became about the same size as the Songqing spacecraft. It looked like a black ball made of 2 pieces of scrap iron. This was obviously some kind of exploration device. It doesn't look like a device to me, Kataga said in a deep voice. Oh, Dong, he turned his head curiously. Officer Kataga, do you have a different opinion? Kataga frowned and looked at the screen. I don't think it's purely a mechanical device. Shiwen said, then what is it? Kataga sighed. This small planet is full of strangeness. When I first arrived on Azure Tree, I had this feeling. These words were said for Dingmeng. Dingmeng was also secretly surprised. If the steel ball was not a mechanical device, could it be a living thing? However, whether it was or not was not important because the situation of the ball was exactly the same as the Songqing spacecraft. It fell halfway and then disappeared. Even the radar could not see the bottom. What happened? Shiwen hesitated. Should we try it too? Dong, he smiled bitterly. We definitely have to try it, but we can't try it like they did. The Imperial fleet could launch 7 Songqing spacecraft at once, but Supremacy did not have such luxury because they could not afford to lose them. Dong, he said, activate a medium-sized drone and use manual mode to operate it. Turn on the camera and record the whole process. Eject it down. He had thought about it thoroughly. Since the radar could not see clearly, they would turn on the drone's camera. They should at least be able to see what was going on. The Sovereign's reconnaissance aircraft was more than 50 meters long. It looked like a triangular paper plane, but both wings and tail were installed with booster and power ejectors. As soon as it was launched, it floated down lightly. After entering the atmosphere, both wings and tail ejected crystal flames, and the whole aircraft slowly glided to the ground. Catherine controlled the reconnaissance aircraft remotely. The scanning system had been turned on, and the real-time image of the surface appeared on the screen. The terrain of the planet was almost the same, all blackened, scorched earth and rubble. Looking from the sky, every place looked the same. Of course, this was easy to understand. The ground had long been scorched by the light of 7 suns. Suddenly, the screen went black, and the camera's signal was cut off. Dong, he said in surprise. What's the situation? Catherine was even more surprised. I don't know. I suddenly lost contact. Everyone looked at each other. They couldn't explain such a strange thing. Shiwen said in a deep voice, send 3 more drones down and record each other. We must see clearly and find the cause. 5 minutes later, the 3 reconnaissance aircraft whistled into the atmosphere again. This time, Catherine switched to 3 screens. They were all real-time images of the 3 planes. The same image appeared very quickly. The screen suddenly went black, and the 3 planes lost contact again. Dong Yi's face was livid. Replay the recording. Play it frame by frame. Everyone keep your eyes on it. Since the 3 planes were launched one after another, the last plane lost contact a second or 2 later than the first 2. It was also in this less than a second that everyone finally saw clearly. The reconnaissance aircraft was flying in the clouds. Without warning, a purple-black ray appeared in the dark clouds. This ray was as thin as a finger, fast and trembling. It was like a sword suddenly slashing out a fan, and this fan directly vaporized the drone. It was as if the plane in the picture had been erased, and then the ray disappeared into thin air like a magic trick. For a moment, the command center was silent. Everyone believed that at this moment, the other 2 families were also shocked. This was definitely the first time they had seen such a strange and terrifying thing. That ray was similar to the ray emitted by a long-range communication probe. It was too thin, so thin that the starship's radar could not detect it. But that was the problem. This ray, which was less than 1 meters thick and less than 10 meters long, could vaporize a drone made of titanium alloy. What kind of terrifying power was that? Although the weapons on the starship could also achieve this effect, that was a railgun. The 2 could not be compared at all. In fact, the power was not the most important thing. The most frightening thing was, where did it come from? How did it get there? It came and went without a trace. There was no trace at all. "Send 3 more down," Shewin said through gritted teeth. This kind of reconnaissance drone was not worth much. There were more than 1,000 of them on Sovereign, so they could do whatever they wanted. However, it was useless. As soon as the drones broke through the atmosphere and entered the clouds, they encountered this result. After sending more than 20 planes in a row, Dong Yi rubbed his temples. He felt a headache. Shewin did not issue any more orders. Instead, he closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. Looking at the other 2 families, the situation was exactly the same. The sturgeon's steel ball also turned into nothingness when it fell into the clouds. The Empire's fleet no longer dared to use the expensive Songqing spaceships. Instead, they kept sending small detectors down. However, the Empire's fleet was really rich. There were a lot of detectors. They all flew out one after another, forming a line in the air. However, after the line disappeared into the clouds, there was no more reaction. They were all vaporized. Ming Huaji kept staring at the Empire's fleet. Something's not right. His voice alarmed everyone. Dong Yi could not help but ask, "Did you find something, Mr. Ming?" Ming Huaji pointed to the screen and said, "Look, the Norse Empire's fleet is still different from ours." Everyone took a closer look and quickly understood. The detectors of the Empire's fleet had dropped much more. At least, those detectors were destroyed by the ray after penetrating the clouds. Dong Yi turned his head and said, "Analyze the data." Catherine immediately said, "Comparative analysis. The aircraft they sent out are equivalent to our small reconnaissance aircraft. There are 211 of them. The initial speed is Mach 45. After entering the atmosphere, it drops to Mach 20. After entering the clouds, it drops to Mach 15. Shewin said, "Maybe it's because of the speed." Dong Yi said, "Activate the small unmanned reconnaissance aircraft and descend at Mach 10. This type of small reconnaissance aircraft was really small. It was not more than 15 meters long. It dived down like an eagle in the sky. However, Shewin's analysis was correct this time. The drone actually penetrated the clouds safely and disappeared 9,000 meters from ground. It's really because of the speed." Everyone was shocked. Dong Yi said, "Continue, descend at Mach 5. Catherine immediately operated the drone carefully on the screen, but the operation of the Supreme definitely couldn't hide from the radars of the other 2 families. Everyone saw clearly that when the drone's speed reached Mach 5, the altitude it descended was much lower, about 8,500 meters. This time, the Frogmen and the Empire's fleet did the same. They threw out drones, detectors, and reconnaissance devices as if they did not cost money. Everyone was constantly reducing their speed and breaking through new heights. Of course, the time interval was longer and longer each time. When the large and small aircraft descended to an altitude of about 4,000 meters, 233 hours and 30 minutes had passed. It was almost 10 days. The speed of the aircraft was already below the speed of sound. They could no longer reduce this speed. One reason was that time did not allow for it. Another reason was that the height of 4,000 meters was a threshold. No matter how much they reduced their speed, they would definitely trigger the ray if they continued to descend. The progress of landing was once again in a difficult situation. Shewin frowned and said, "I think it's the force field." Ming Huaji nodded and said, "That's right. Only the pull of the force field can trigger that ray. The force field is just a matter of speed, strength, and direction." Dong Yi said, "We can use the most traditional method. We can release the small drones, then use the small aircraft to drop the micro-detector down. We can use the radar to precisely lock onto the detector." "Everyone, what do you think?" Everyone's eyes lit up. Dingming also thought that this was a good idea. The so-called microdetector was not a product of this era. It was the most primitive and ancient aerial camera. The power system was not crystal energy, but electrical energy to drive the propeller. It used radio waves to transmit signals. The reason the Supreme had such a thing was mainly due to the narrow terrain of the cave. However, No one had thought that it would be useful in such a situation. However, there was a problem. The size of the detector was really too small. It was only about 5 meters long. When it was thousands of meters in the air, the slightest turbulence or other vibrations could cause it to deviate from the preset path. This required a high level of manual skills. "I'll do it." Sheng Tianming stood up decisively. Ding Ming could not help but feel a little surprised. He secretly asked, "Can he do it?" Lu Qing's expression did not look good. His manual skills in the field of machinery are not bad. He has won awards in the flying competition organized by the Alliance more than once. Ding Ming said, "I really did not expect this guy to specialize in this." Lu Qing did not say anything. She looked at the screen expressionlessly. This was because Sheng Tianming had intentionally or unintentionally glanced at her when he stepped forward. The smug look on his face was especially obvious. Ding Ming was speechless. How was this guy here to participate in the operation? He was clearly here to pick up girls. He wanted to show off in front of beautiful girls all the time. However, Sheng Tianming's show was quickly dismissed mercilessly. Kartika also stood up. "Young Master Ming, you should rest well. I will ensure the safety of the flight." "Young Master Ming, searching for resources is your specialty." This. Sheng Tianming's smile suddenly froze. It was true that he had won awards in the competition, but when it came to manual flying skills, no one in the Alliance dared to say that they were better than Kartika. The reason was simple. Kartika was the founder of those competitions. Show off? Show off? Show off. Chapter 489. In the command center, Kartika sat in front of the screen, carefully operating the miniature detector. This detector was a circular flying saucer. The saucer was as stable as an elevator, slowly descending vertically. Everyone's hearts sank. 3,500 meters, 3,300 meters, 3,000 meters, 2,800 meters, 2,500 meters. As the altitude dropped bit by bit, the ground gradually became clear, and the strange ray was not triggered. 800 meters, 700 meters, 600 meters, 500 meters, the information on the screen kept refreshing, and the ground seemed to be within reach. Suddenly, the flying saucer lost control again, but this time it was not the mysterious ray, but the starship's mainframe that lost the connection signal. The flying saucer broke free from Kartika's control and fell straight to the ground. It smashed into a mountain rock and exploded into smoke, turning into a pile of scrap metal. Dong Yi hurriedly asked, "What's going on?" Catherine quickly explained, "We've detected a very strange dynamic magnetic field in the area below 300 meters. It's producing very strong electromagnetic interference, and the signal has been interrupted. However, the data on the ground is out, and there's no problem with the density. The ground's gravity is that of a habitable planet, so it's normal." These words might not have touched Ding Ming, but it was subversive to everyone else's understanding. There was no problem with the density of a small planet, and with the existence of the strange ray, all signs indicated that the strangeness here was definitely not a natural phenomenon, but a man-made one. Then, how did this small planet make the entire galaxy revolve around it? Just think about it. The God's War Star Ring was a huge project, and how much power was needed to support its operation. However, compared to the God's War Star Ring, the God's War Star Ring was nothing. Dong Yi rubbed his temples again. "Can I understand it this way? Large mechanical units can't land on this planet by default?" Shuan pondered and said, "Agreed." Ming Huaji also nodded in agreement. Dong Yi continued, "Secondly, the landing unit can't be too big. It has to be a miniature one, because if it's too big, it might trigger its warning system. That ray is a defensive measure." Although he was just making assumptions, it was undoubtedly the closest to the truth, so no one refuted him. Dong Yi continued, "Furthermore, the landing unit cannot be too fast, at least not faster than the speed of sound. The sonic boom effect is likely to trigger the warning." Shuan said, "The energy fluctuation of the entire planet only appears once every few years, and it only lasts for a few seconds each time. I also believe that this is a defensive position that doesn't want the outside world to pay attention to." Ming Huaji finally understood what they meant. Bosses, is it because this planet only allows a single life form to land? You're probably right, Ding Ming said calmly again. Ming Huaji narrowed his eyes. How so? Ding Ming said, because the other side's thinking is exactly the same as yours. If you don't believe me, take a look. At this time, the radar screen switched to the sturgeon. This time, the frogmen didn't release a steel ball. Instead, they released a small carp spaceship. Sheng Tianming exclaimed, "Do they want to die?" Everyone was stunned as well. What was going on? Should he force his way through? Reality proved that they were wrong. The carp spaceship didn't descend after entering the atmosphere. Instead, its chassis opened up and released frogman soldiers. Are they airdropping them? Dong Yi's eyes widened. Ding Ming shook his head and sighed. No. Observe carefully. Catherine zoomed in on the image. The frogs that came out of the airdrop looked like fat frogmen, but their bodies were much larger than normal frogmen. Moreover, their eyes seemed to be closed. They didn't seem to be living creatures. Ding Ming sighed. The frogmen's biological and mechanical technology is very well integrated. Even if their soldiers die, their body parts can be modified and reassembled. They can be very useful on the battlefield. These frogmen are called planters. He didn't explain why they had such a strange name, because everyone quickly understood. When the 30 or so frogmen came into contact with the air, they seemed to slowly vaporize. Their bodies gradually became blurry, and their organic molecules floated in the air. However, these organic molecules were changing at a speed visible to the naked eye. They expanded from a molecular state to a seed state. Then, they grew small tails and transformed into tadpoles. This was the evolution of frogmen, and it was well integrated into the application of biological technology by the frogmen. A strong wind blew high in the sky, and the tadpoles danced in the air. Although many of the tadpoles were roasted to death by the strong sunlight, a large number of living creatures still floated to the ground. The tadpoles that had completely landed on the ground had evolved into half-biological, half-armored mechanical larvae. They looked like spiders, and there were tens of thousands of them. These mechanical spiders were very agile. Their eyes glowed red. They lowered their heads and quickly spread out in all directions. There was no need to think about it. They had definitely started searching immediately. Dong Yi laughed bitterly. I've been flying in space for so many years, and this is the first time I've seen something like this. The temperature on the ground is at least 700 degrees Celsius. These frogman scouts can actually withstand the heat. Kataga said they might be absorbing light and heat energy as their power source. Seeing that the black frogs had taken the initiative, Shuan could no longer remain calm. We can't let them take the lead, Dong Yi said, but we don't have something as advanced as a cedar. Ding Ming finally stood up and said, we can directly airdrop people down. This. Everyone's eyes widened again. Directly dropping people down? Are you sure that the terrifying ray won't be triggered? Looking at the suspicious gazes, Ding Ming smiled. If you're worried, then drop me down first and let me go to the ground to build a signal tower. Seeing that Ding Ming had become a different person and was full of confidence, Lu Qing secretly sent a message to Jun Ling. Did he discover something? The straight woman of steel had always been honest. Her answer was very straightforward. Yes, Lu Qing said. Then what did he discover? The straight woman of steel said, we can sense the energy of the ray. It's not a threat. Lu Qing also widened her eyes. What do you mean by sensing the energy of the ray? Do you think you're a technological radar? You could destroy a spaceship in an instant. How is this not a threat? She wanted to ask more, but at this time, Shiwen spoke. His tone was very gentle. Brother Ding, what do you need? As long as the Supreme Name can provide it for you, we'll satisfy you. In her opinion, people like Ding Ming were risking their lives. She had always respected such professional people. Ding Ming smiled. It's very simple. Just give me a set of individual armor that can fly. He had his concerns about wanting armor, but not battle armor. The energy converted from the source core of the battle armor was too great. It would not be fun if the ray was triggered. The individual armor was just a simple crystal power operating device. It was enough to fly to the ground without causing too much of a commotion. However, it was quite troublesome to airdrop people. It had to be a small transport ship that entered the atmosphere to carry out the airdrop. I'll go too. Jun Ling raised his hand. We'll go too. Elephant and the others were not to be outdone. If Big Sister dared to go, why would they not dare to go? This time, Shuan was a little dumbfounded. There were many bold people these days. However, this group of people did not seem to be good people. Shuan could understand. Shuan spoke in a low voice. Everyone, there's no need to rush. Brother Ding is just exploring the way first. If it doesn't work, we'll think of another way. It's better for the main combat power to stay on the main ship. She was the commander of the operation. Naturally, she had the final say. However, considering the inexplicable magnetic field interference on the surface, it was likely that the signal would be interrupted after going down. Shuan said sincerely, Brother Ding, if you can land successfully, the Supreme Name will stay in space and wait for your return. This guarantee was equivalent to saying that as long as you did not die, the starship would always escort you. Soon, a small transport ship flew into the atmosphere. Ding Ming jumped into the clouds from the connecting cabin. Crystal flames spewed out from the soles of his boots and his back. His whole body dragged a long blue tail as he fell to the ground. Lu Qing stared at the radar screen intently. It was impossible to say that she was not nervous. However, Ding Ming did not trigger the ray from beginning to end. As the soles of Ding Ming's boots slowly landed on the ground, everyone was shocked. It worked. This method works. Xiao AI suddenly said in a very serious tone, No, the temperature of the ground should be at least over 1,000 degrees, but the real-time temperature I detected is less than 50 degrees. If the temperature of the ground exceeded 1,000 degrees, it would be very difficult for people below the war supremacy level to survive without protective equipment. However, if the temperature was less than 50 degrees, even ordinary people could move normally. Ding Ming nodded and said, I was wondering just now. Even if the mechanical soldiers of the Black Frog race are not afraid of high temperatures, it is impossible for them to move in a temperature of over 1,000 degrees in their semi-biological state. They would have melted long ago. So there is something else on the ground. As he spoke, he activated his telekinesis vision, and the real scene that stunned him finally appeared. The scorched earth and rubble on the ground did not change. These were all real. However, 300 meters above the ground, there seemed to be a layer of invisible film that blocked the 7-colored sunlight from shining on it. This barrier was very similar to the one above Black Gold Base, but Black Gold Base's barrier was a simulation technology. It diluted the heat through liquid metal, but this transparent screen was real. Not only did it block the sunlight, but it also blocked all signals from the outside world. Therefore, the light on the ground was not good, and the real sky was gloomy. Ding Ming looked down at his wristwatch. The signal indicator light of his wristwatch had been completely extinguished. Ding Ming looked up at the sky again and could not help but murmur, This barrier is probably wrapped around the entire planet, right? Xiao AI's voice was also very serious. I can't even analyze its composition. This is an extremely advanced technology. There are even encrypted instructions in the barrier. There is no way to read the data inside. Ding Ming frowned and said, That's the strange part. Since there is a barrier, there must be a source. But where is the source? Chapter 490. On the scorched, abandoned planet, Ding Ming flew at full speed at a low altitude of 100 meters. In fact, there was a reason why he dared to come down alone. The reason was the mysterious and strange defensive ray. Previously, when Supremacy kept dropping drones, Ding Ming felt a slight tremor in the divine light bracer on his wrist whenever the purplish-black ray appeared. At first, he thought it was a coincidence, but as the number of drones increased, he knew that it was not a coincidence. The atmosphere and the starships in space were still quite far away. If the bracer could sense the ray, even though it was so far away, there was no doubt that the ray energy had something to do with Xinguang technology. When he was on Madison, the singularity had revealed to Ding Ming that when the Mouse star civilization was destroyed, the owner of the singularity escaped to this star system through space-time travel. That was to say, the footprints of Shengguang technology were most likely scattered all over the main star system. If the bracer could sense them, it was possible to find the corresponding footprints. Ding Ming's biggest wish now was to release the sealed little rascal, so it was necessary to find the footprints of Shengguang technology. Therefore, Ding Ming also flew at a low altitude at high speed to see if the bracer could sense them again. However, this method was like looking for a needle in a haystack. After all, the diameter of this planet was only so big. At this speed, it would probably take dozens of hours to circle at once. Now, time was really tight. The fleets of the Holy Grail Federation, the Steel Mane Empire, and the Devourer could arrive at any time. By then, there would be 6 parties on top of him. It was impossible to maintain the current balance. Sooner or later, there would be a conflict. Suddenly, something swayed slightly in his field of vision. Ding Ming took a closer look. Under the scorched earth 200 meters in front of him, there was a tiny droplet of water attached to a piece of debris. Using his telekinesis to scan it carefully, Ding Ming found that it was not a real droplet. The organic molecules inside it were extremely complex, and its temperature was astonishing. It had reached more than 4,600 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, even low-grade alloys would melt. The most amazing thing was that the droplet did not emit any heat to the outside world. Guangying, are you there? Ding Ming was not used to calling the water droplet Zheng Ming, even though the water droplet's image was Zheng Ming's big brother. I've already seen it, and I know what you want to ask. This is not a Kelvin spore life form. If you want to ask me what it is, then I'm sorry, I don't know either. The only thing I know is that this thing is not a life form. Not a living being? Ding Ming was puzzled. He scanned the area again and found that this kind of water droplet could be found 3 meters underground in the sand every 500 meters or so. Could it be that all the heat absorbed by the barrier has been absorbed by this thing? Xiao AI analyzed. Ding Ming could not figure out either. This planet was really strange, even stranger than any of the strange environments he had seen before. After flying for a long distance, this time, the desolate scorched earth finally changed. In the middle of the vast plain, there was a huge crater. This crater was really like a giant, because Xiao AI had calculated that the diameter of this crater was 5,612 meters. From afar, it looked like a black hole attached to the ground. At a glance, it was impossible to see the bottom of it. Ding Ming's telekinesis vision could not detect the depth of the crater, which meant that this crater was at least 8,000 meters deep. Ding Ming slowly descended. He stood at the edge of the crater and looked down. Even though he had always been brave, this crater still gave him a creepy feeling. This feeling was completely different from standing on the top of a skyscraper and looking down. Large amounts of cold air rushed up from the crater, as if there was something huge down there. Looking carefully at the inner wall of the crater, it was smooth and flat. There was not even a crack. He did not know what kind of device had cut it, but one thing was for sure. This was definitely man-made. It could not have been formed naturally. Let's go down. Ding Ming reactivated his armor and flew down into the crater. The crater was not vertical. Instead, it was slanted downwards. The depth of the crater was really shocking. Xiao AI's detection vision changed the data bit by bit. 1,100 meters, 1,200 meters, 1,300 meters, 1,400 meters. The speed was a little slow, but that was also because of the rays. If there were rays down there, it would be best to slow down as much as possible. However, Ding Ming soon discovered the problem with this crater. The deeper they fell, the lower the temperature in the crater. At first, he did not feel it, but when they reached a depth of 5,000 meters, the temperature in the crater dropped below zero. This temperature definitely had no effect on origin ability users. However, when they reached a depth of 10,000 meters, the temperature had dropped to minus 25 degrees. Origin ability users could naturally resist the cold. However, When they reached a depth of 15,000 meters, the temperature plummeted to minus 70 degrees. Ding Meng's single soldier armor was covered in a layer of ice. Ding Meng had no choice but to activate his origin to resist the cold. There was a difference between low temperature and high temperature. The higher the temperature, the lower the temperature, the less significant it would be to humans and objects. Those that should melt would melt, and those that should die would die. However, when the temperature reached 100,000 or even 1,000,000 degrees, it would explode with an astonishing amount of energy. That was the temperature of a starship's propulsion reactor. Humans would not be able to experience it. However, low temperature was different. Once the temperature dropped below minus 100 degrees, every degree of decrease would bring about a completely different change. This was because the movement of organic molecules and microscopic particles would constantly slow down, and the wave-particle duality property would constantly weaken. When the temperature reached minus 273 degrees, it would be absolute zero. Everything in the world would come to a standstill. Even Ding Meng's telekinesis would not be able to operate. Of course, absolute zero was just a saying. It was impossible for an environment with such low temperatures to exist in the universe. However, the deeper they flew, the lower the temperature became. When they reached a depth of 18,000 meters, Ding Meng had to activate 5 origin points to resist the cold. This was enough to show how abnormal this huge pit was. Under normal circumstances, the deeper they went into the planet's core, the higher the temperature would be. However, it was the complete opposite here. The temperature was getting lower and lower, completely defying the laws of physics. Could it be that this place led to a black hole? Just as Ding Meng thought of this, a light spot appeared in front of him. Since he could see light, it must be the exit. Sure enough, the light spot slowly grew bigger and turned into a cursor. The cursor gradually turned into a disk. Then, Ding Meng's jaw dropped. He had an incredulous expression on his face. Not only did he see the situation in front of him, but he also felt a powerful surge of energy. This disk gradually revealed its true form as he descended. This was Xinguang Biotechnology's ghost, demon pupil. Back on Planet Thorn and Planet Madison, Xinguang Biotechnology's ghost, demon pupil only had a diameter of about 20 meters. However, this demon pupil in front of him occupied the entire tunnel. This was a teleportation portal that was more than 5,000 meters long. Ordinary teleportation portals could teleport Ding Meng from one planet to another. However, this teleportation portal was at least 10 times larger. What could it teleport? How far could it travel? How much power did it have? These questions were beyond the limits of Ding Meng's imagination. He could not imagine it, even if he was killed. However, something terrifying finally happened. Ding Meng realized that this time, Xinguang Biotechnology's teleportation portal seemed to have an irresistible suction force. He had clearly turned around and was heading back up, but his body was involuntarily falling into the light spot. Not good, Xiao AI exclaimed. This time, Xinguang Biotechnology's power is unprecedentedly strong. It is 3,500 times more powerful than the sum of all the previous portals combined. Ding Meng's head immediately buzzed. What did 3,500 times mean? Are you sure you didn't miscalculate? Ding Meng shouted. He could not break free from this suction force. Hurry up and use the Diamond Star technique to resist, Xiao AI reminded him. With a loud clang, a pure white, shiny crown shield immediately covered Ding Meng's body. It could be said that this was his strongest defense at the moment. Even a powerful combatant at the level of a battle sage would not be able to break through it with one blow. However, Ding Meng's confidence was shattered a second later. The shield only took shape for a second before it was blown to smithereens by the powerful energy flow and turned into nothingness. Just as he closed his eyes and prepared to die, the ghost demon pupil sucked him in. The death from suffocation that he had imagined did not happen. Neither did the instantaneous teleportation that he had imagined. All he saw was a white light. This light was so bright that he could not even open his eyes. Even with his eyes closed, he felt a stinging pain in his eyeballs. It was obvious that this strong light had damaged the nerves in his retina. For a moment, Ding Ming felt a sense of fear. He was a general-level origin ability user. Every part of his body, even his pores, had been tempered thousands of times by countless pure essences. But now, even light could stab him. Xinguang biotechnology had once again refreshed his understanding of the world. His whole body was in this world of light. Ding Ming gradually felt the light wrap around him like a sharp sword. It penetrated his body and also his brain. His head hurt so much that it felt like thousands of ants were gnawing on it. The origin was spinning wildly, and his origin energy was desperately resisting. However, the power of the light was so strong that it made one despair. There was no way to stop it. The pain gradually penetrated his soul, and it felt like his soul was about to leave. Ding Ming's eyes flashed with many scenes of the past. It was not that he had not experienced this before. This was what it felt like to be on the verge of death. Could it be that I will eventually die on a foreign planet? Ding Ming suddenly felt a little sad. He was not afraid of death. He had brushed shoulders with death many times, but it was different this time. He still had many unfulfilled wishes, especially the mission that his elder brother, the princess, had given him. After 7 years, he still had not been able to return to the Dasheng kingdom. Gradually, his telekinetic vision spontaneously retracted, and his consciousness slowly blurred. Death was sometimes so strange. Before Ding Ming completely closed his eyes, the last thing he thought of was not an old friend from the past, nor was it the inheritance of a hero's knife. Instead, it was Lu Qing's big, beautiful eyes. Now, these eyes seem to be looking at him. If you want to return to your original world, can you bring me along with you? Unfortunately, he could not bring her along even if he wanted to. Chapter 491. BZ. A long charging sound suddenly rang out. Ding Ming slowly opened his eyes. What he saw was a ceiling, a silver-white metal ceiling. What is this place? Am I okay? Ding Ming was puzzled. This time, it was not Xiao AI who answered him, but the hologram. I don't know where this place is, but the core system seems to have entered hibernation mode. Ding Ming was slightly surprised. He carefully sensed and found that the detection vision on his retina had disappeared. Xiao AI was indeed not moving. The hologram said, "We seem to have been teleported to a starship." Hearing this, Ding Ming stood up like a carp. Indeed, the light and shadow did not speak nonsense. This was a silver-white metal hall. There were all kinds of simple, but not simple equipment, smooth and gorgeous lines, and a dazzling array of technological devices. In the center of the hall was a huge control panel. This was indeed the command hall of a starship. Strangely, there was not a single person in the hall. Ding Ming rubbed his eyes. The bright light of the teleportation array had caused great damage to his eyes. Although they were much better now, he still felt that his eyes were a little sore. He carefully scanned his surroundings, and his expression changed. This place. I think I've been here before. The hologram was also curious. You've been here before? Are you sure? Ding Ming's gaze fell on the control panel. There was a palm-sized notch on the side of the panel. Ding Ming stepped forward and pressed his palm into it. The control panel lit up, and the system's voice rang out. Crew members detected. System is starting. Insufficient energy detected. System is charging. Charging complete. Generating for you, swoosh. 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 Multiple rays and cursors immediately appeared on the control panel, forming a simple 3D dynamic map. Many scorching suns of different colors were orbiting a giant star. Every scorching sun had a different trajectory and speed. Beside the map, there was also a bunch of data that was rapidly being refreshed. The hologram said, "It looks like a map of the rainbow galaxy." Ding Ming also stared at the map. This time, he was silent for almost half a minute before he said, "No." The silhouette hesitated. "No?" Ding Ming's tone was resolute. "Absolutely not. He really isn't." The silhouette discovered that there were only 5 blazing sun stars on this map, but there were 7 blazing sun stars with 7 colors. If he could see Ding Meng's expression, he would find that Ding Meng's face suddenly changed and became indescribably terrifying. The map was still running. A moment later, the 5 blazing suns formed a straight line. This was the legendary alignment of 5 stars. The number next to it was fixed, 20. A countdown timer was also generated under the data. 36, 00, 00, 35, 59, 59, 35, 59, 58, 35, 59, 57. This is the black gold base under the desert of the K8 Dead Silent Star of the Holy Grail Federation's K-Star region. Does this mean that the solar eclipse will arrive in 36 hours? His judgment was based on Ding Meng's memories. However, hadn't the black gold base been destroyed 7 years ago? How had they been teleported back? Could it be that they had been teleported across thousands of light years? There was no way to answer these questions. Ding Meng rushed out without another word. The world outside was exactly the same as it had been before. There was a vast and barren planet, golden sand that emitted hot air currents, a vast desert that stretched as far as the eye could see, and 5 blazing sun stars that emitted different colors on the horizon. When he looked up again, not far in front of him, a light screen mixed with air currents rose from the ground and into the sky. If this was not the man-made barrier of the black gold base, what was it? If this planet was not the dead silent star, what else could it be? The air temperature was now 493 degrees Celsius. With Ding Meng's current strength, he did not have to worry about it. However, a bone-chilling chill rushed from the soles of his feet to his head. Ding Meng circulated his origin energy and activated his telekinetic vision. He was shocked to find that everything in front of him was real and not some virtual illusion. Could this be a time reversal? Had Xinguang Biotechnology's teleportation array sent him back to 7 years ago, on the eve of the solar eclipse? He looked down again. As expected, the clothes he was wearing were torn and tattered. They did not even cover his body. His personal armor was long gone. Ding Meng suddenly felt a chill on his wrist. He flipped his hand, and a dark gold T-shaped blade appeared between his fingers. At this moment, Ding Meng's blood boiled. This feeling was like a long-lost family member had returned to his side. It washed away all the cold and fear. The silhouette also felt his scalp tingle. F***, all of this is real. But you have to hurry. The solar eclipse is coming. There's still 36 hours left. All right, let's leave this place first. Ding Meng had also gotten used to it. He was very familiar with the black gold base. He rushed toward the desert, passed through the barrier, found the hidden exit of the Kuan Peng battleship, and returned to the passageway he had come. It was still the same familiar experiment hall. It was still the same familiar scene. The hall was littered with corpses, and blood flowed like a river. The severed fingers and arms of the laborers were mixed with the corpses of the mercenaries. This was a slaughterhouse. In the middle of the pile of corpses, a slender woman in a professional suit and high heels was carefully inspecting the corpses. Ding Meng was stunned. The person in front of him was Julie. He had killed her with his own hands. How did she come back to life? However, he quickly felt relieved. If he had really returned to 7 years ago, then Julie was still alive at this time. Julie had not changed. Even her tone was the same as before. Ding Meng, I am very happy that you are still alive. Ding Meng did not bother to be polite this time. You don't have to say any more. Don't even think about the memory chip. Julie was not angry. She continued to smile. It seems that there is something that you have not understood. Ding Meng sneered and did not answer. With his current strength, he did not even need to lift a finger to kill Julie. There was a surge of air in the air. 2 golden sabers appeared above Ding Meng's head out of thin air. They were the blazing sun battle pattern. The sabers formed a cross and slashed toward Julie's head. Ding Meng would not show any mercy to the murderer who had killed Xiao Si. He even felt that this was a little too easy for Julie. Killing her with 1 slash was taking care of her and sparing her the pain of torture. There was a ding sound. The sabers hit a layer of light blue ice energy and then quickly disappeared. Ding Meng was surprised. A spinning spherical ice shield had appeared on Julie's body. Judging from the color and density of the shield, Julie's strength had increased many times compared to before. She was at least a combat master. What was going on? Ding Meng still could not figure out the reason. Julie sneered. With your strength, it is impossible for you to keep the memory chip. As she spoke, the temperature of the surrounding air suddenly dropped sharply. In his telekinesis vision, the moving speed of the organic molecules in the air seemed to be frozen. Ding Meng was once again overwhelmed by a chill. This was not a chill caused by fear, but a real chill. In just a moment, Ding Meng's limbs even felt a little numb, and his blood flow was not smooth. He had been frozen before and knew the horror of cold. Swish! Ding Meng quickly operated the first 5 points, and a wave of heat spread out from his body, dispelling the cold around him. He did not dare to be careless. Everything in front of him was too strange, and he could not tell whether it was an illusion or reality. However, he had to get through this hurdle. Looking at the expressionless Ding Meng, Julie was also surprised. She had obviously sensed the terrifying aura that suddenly erupted from Ding Meng. You are just a coolie, but you have improved to such a level in such a short time. You have no choice but to hand over the memory chip. She suddenly pushed one of her palms forward, and a surge of ice energy surged out from her palm. It was not a palm wind that was pushed out, but a solid ice hurricane that vaguely resembled a river. As soon as the hurricane was released, she moved forward like a ghost and pushed out another palm. This time, the hurricane was even more violent. Even though they were still 30 to 40 meters away, the surface of Ding Meng's arm was frozen. The two hurricanes overlapped, but Julie did not stop. Her body floated forward again, and this time, she pushed out with both palms. Back then, her classic Yangtze River's 3-layered waves had created a bubble-like blue energy circle. But today, the blue energy circle directly turned into a crystal-clear blue ball. It was like ice, but not ice, water, but not water. It seemed solid, but also soft and shapeless. For a martial arts technique to reach this level, it was definitely at a very high level. The power of the Yangtze River's 3-layered waves was many times stronger than it was 7 years ago. Ding Meng did not move. He looked coldly at the ice ball that was rolling toward him. Seeing that was about to swallow him up, Ding Meng had already gathered strength in his palms, and a cross was formed and pushed out fiercely. TCH, the sound was very strange, like the fusion of ice and fire. Sure enough, the blue ice ball froze in front of Ding Meng and slowly changed color. It turned from blue to green, from green to yellow, from yellow to red, and finally became extremely red. This was using source power to backfire. I don't care how strong your ice energy is, I'll directly use heat to turn it into a fireball. It's standard brute force. The fireball grew bigger and bigger, and the temperature rose rapidly. The experiment hall was as cold as an ice house, but in just 1 or 2 seconds, it was overflowing with heat. The corpses on the ground began to smoke and were ignited into a raging fire. Here you go. Ding Meng exerted strength again, and the fireball rolled toward the opposite side. The shield on Julie's body left her body and collided with the fireball. There was a loud explosion as the two balls of energy collided. Almost everything on the ground was reduced to ashes, and the steel plates on the walls of the hall fell off. This explosion could be said to be earth-shattering, and sand and stones flew everywhere. In the midst of the smoke, Ding Meng's figure suddenly appeared. By the time Julie realized that something was wrong, it was already too late. Ding Meng flew up and held his blade in a reverse grip. His most classic hand blade was already in front of Julie's face. Julie would definitely die. Crack! There was a crisp sound. Julie instinctively protected her sides with her palms, but the price of this protection was that the claw blade directly cut off her wrist. The claw blade had been infused with pure source power, so the severed wrist was burned black. The claw blade's momentum did not stop there, and the gleaming tip of the blade went straight for Julie's neck artery. Everyone was an expert in the art of killing, and they knew where the vital points of the human body were. Once Ding Meng cut the artery, even if they did not die, they would be severely injured. Even if they did not die, they could only wait for death. Chapter 492. Clang. There was an urgent sound. Julie leaned back, and a glowing sharp blade popped out of the tip of her right shoe. The light of the blade shot up like a sharp arrow, but she somersaulted a few times in the air and landed steadily in the distance. Ding Meng did not chase after her. He continued to hold the blade in his backhand, but the tip of the claw blade was hooked on Julie's high-heeled shoe. He had suffered from this in the past. It was impossible for him to fall in the same place twice. He had always been wary of Julie's move. Although Julie stood firm, her right wrist had been cut off, and blood kept flowing out her white neck. Ding Meng's blade still cut her neck. Ding Meng's hand blade could be said to be at the peak of the realm. Julie also looked at Ding Meng coldly. She did not move, but there was a small silver pistol in her left hand. The muzzle was aimed at the ground 3 meters away from her. Only then did Ding Meng notice that there was still a person alive in the pile of corpses on the ground. That person's whole body was covered with a thick and black mane, and he was dripping with blood. He curled up on the ground and was almost half dead. However, after seeing the person's face clearly, Ding Meng could not help but exclaim, "Xiao Si." The person who lived like a mouse was really Xiao Si. Xiao Si raised his head with difficulty and said in a trembling voice, "Ding, Brother Ding." At that moment, Ding Meng's emotions suddenly changed. He was surprised, excited, and touched. He had never expected that Xiao Si would still be alive after going back in time. "Xiao Si, you died for me. I, Ding Meng, will let you live today no matter what. I will not let history repeat itself." Ding Meng took a deep breath and said calmly to Julie, "Let him go, and I can give you the memory." However, the answer he got was a muffled gunshot. Julie pulled the trigger mercilessly, and a white energy bullet shot out from the muzzle. Little Four's head exploded with a bang, and one could clearly see that the brain had turned into countless blood droplets, and the skull had been shattered into pieces. The blood splattered everywhere and stained Julie's white shirt red. However, Julie did not blink from the beginning to the end. It was as if she had been prepared in advance. Ding Meng flew into a rage. He disappeared from where he stood and appeared in front of Julie. Even tearing this woman to pieces would not be able to extinguish the fire in his chest. However, Julie still did not move. She looked at him expressionlessly, and the look in her eyes. "This is bad." Ding Meng finally realized that he had been tricked. At this moment, a terrifying aura erupted from Julie's body. It was an aura that even Ding Meng felt threatened by. Boom! A light pupil with a diameter of 200 meters appeared out of thin air in the middle of the hall. It completely covered everything and was extremely dazzling. Then, the light pupil exploded violently. It could no longer be described with words. It was a world of light, a world of stillness. Everything that was caught in it would turn into ashes and vanish into nothingness. After an unknown amount of time, the white light gradually dimmed and disappeared. The entire experiment hall was gone. It had been blown up into a spherical cave by the explosion. At the bottom of the cave, a golden mirror image of a crown pulsed with a faint light. Ding Meng walked up with an expressionless face. Julie did not hesitate to self-destruct with her combat master-level source energy. Fortunately, he reacted quickly enough and activated the crown shield. Otherwise, he would have been blown into nothingness. At this moment, the silhouette said, "Is this real or fake? From what we saw, heard, and smelled, everything seems to be real. But at that time, this woman shouldn't have been so strong, right?" Ding Meng did not answer. He was obviously still immersed in his anger. Even the silhouette could feel that Ding Meng's blood flow and heartbeat were extremely fast. This was a sign of anger. "Ding Meng," the silhouette's tone became serious. "I hope you can remain calm. Anger will only make you lose your balance and trigger your inner demons." Ding Meng said, "You don't understand." "I understand," the silhouette argued. "Little Four has always been a thorn in your side. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't be in a good mood to see him die again." Ding Meng sighed. "It's good that you understand," the silhouette said, but we're in a disadvantageous situation right now. You'd better stay calm and find a way to leave as soon as possible." Ding Ming nodded and stepped into the tunnel. The mining area was dark and oppressive. On the way back, he did not see anyone else. Soon, the suspension bridge of Area PC-35 appeared in front of him. History did not repeat itself because there was a large group of fully armed mercenaries standing on the suspension bridge. Ding Ming recognized all the leaders. There was the fierce-looking general, the respectful Jia Hua, the fairy-like Lan Bing, and the charismatic Chu Yifeng in the center of the group. Everyone from Sea Sky Pole Island was here. It seemed like Chu Yifeng had personally led the team here. It seemed like he had found some clues about the memory chip. As soon as he saw Ding Ming appear, the general immediately whispered, "Young Master Feng, it's him." Chu Yifeng's expression was cold. If the person who came out was Ding Ming, then Julie might have been killed. Could it be that this kid had killed Julie? The general walked forward arrogantly. "Ding Ming, give me the idea, and I'll consider lenient treatment." Ding Ming did not answer. He only used a little force with his eyes, and the general's fat body flew high into the air. When he landed, the mercenaries in the back row were thrown off their feet. This was a little embarrassing. After the marshal got up, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Go!" More than 20 mercenaries immediately raised their spears, aiming at Ding Ming and firing indiscriminately. This kind of attack was nothing to Ding Ming. Countless energy bullets landed on his body, but his tattered labor uniform did not even flinch. Instead, dozens of big holes appeared in the soil around him. After a round of shooting, the mercenaries were all dumbfounded and stopped shooting. Damn it, he was completely invulnerable. Chu Yifeng smiled. "Interesting. Take him down for me." As soon as he finished speaking, Jia Hua turned into a shadow and appeared in front of Ding Ming in the blink of an eye. A pair of burning claws pressed on Ding Ming's shoulders, trying to lift Ding Ming up. Although Ding Ming's reaction was very calm, he was still slightly shocked in his heart. He guessed that Jia Hua was definitely not as strong as before, so he purposely received the pair of claws head-on. He immediately sensed that Jia Hua was already an intermediate war master. Moreover, as Jia Hua approached him, the surrounding environment suddenly twisted and spun. Countless demons and ghosts drilled out, raising their heads and howling at Ding Ming. Ding Ming had suffered greatly in the past when Lan Bing's mental illusion attacked him. Ding Ming was too lazy to be polite with them this time. After his telekinesis increased, his body shook violently. The Overlord's mountain-crushing force had reached a level where it could turn illusions into reality. The telekinesis and source energy that he sent out could be seen with the naked eye. It was like 5 sides were sweeping towards the suspension bridge. Jia Hua immediately spat out a mouthful of blood from the shock. He was also sent flying. He returned the way he came. The surrounding illusions were also shattered and disappeared without a trace. Blue Ice could not help but let out a muffled groan and took 2 steps back. Chu Yifeng frowned. He did not expect Ding Ming to have grown to such a level. He was so strong that even Blue Ice and Jia Hua could not shake him in the slightest. "You're not bad." Chu Yifeng took 2 steps forward and took off his gloves. "Fortunately, I came down personally this time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable." Ding Ming had been on guard for a long time. Chu Yifeng was not weak in the past. Now, he was probably much stronger. Sure enough, Chu Yifeng slowly took off his windbreaker. He shook it out in his hand, causing the windbreaker to straighten. He waved his hand again, and the windbreaker spun towards Ding Ming like a steel alloy. The windbreaker was obviously imbued with powerful energy. As it flew through the air, the sand on the ground was sent flying, and the walls of the tunnel began to collapse. There was a muffled bang. Ding Ming received it with a single palm. However, he was the one who was at a disadvantage this time. The windbreaker was imbued with extremely tough and sturdy origin energy. When his palm struck the edge of the windbreaker, it did not feel like he had struck a steel plate, but rather a mountain. Ding Ming was actually sent sliding backwards. Before he could regain his footing, Ding Ming suddenly felt an extremely dangerous aura descend upon him. He did not even look at it. Instead, he borrowed the force of the attack to do a somersault backwards. Chu Yifeng quickly retracted his palm. The force of the attack disappeared as soon as his palm touched the ground. His other palm struck out again, and the windbreaker flew towards Ding Meng as if it had grown eyes. Chu Yifeng's entire body bounced off the ground, and he swept his leg across the air. This time, Ding Meng could not avoid it. He used his hands to protect his flanks. The windbreaker hit his shoulder, and he used his wrists to block Chu Yifeng's lightning-fast kick. Boom! An extremely powerful force exploded. Even the air seemed to be exploding. Chu Yifeng's kick sent Ding Meng straight into the wall on the left side of the tunnel. The entire tunnel collapsed with a crash. Chu Yifeng picked up the windbreaker on the ground, patted the dust off it, and put it back on. He then turned around and slowly walked towards the suspension bridge. Dig that kid out for me and bring him back to the base. Chu Yifeng seemed very confident. This kick would definitely cripple Ding Meng. Seeing that Chu Yifeng had subdued Ding Meng, the marshal immediately called for the mercenaries to come forward. However, although the tunnel had collapsed, the marshal and the others had only taken a few steps when another figure walked out from the collapsed mud. Ding Meng's body was covered in mud. He looked at the crowd with an expressionless face. This! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Yifeng also turned around in surprise. He looked at Ding Meng with an astonished expression. He did not believe that a laborer could withstand a kick from a general-level origin ability user. Very good. Chu Yifeng's mouth revealed a trace of a cruel smile. It seems that I have underestimated you. However, someone who can find the memory chip is also worthy of my attention. Ding Meng sneered. I'm still all right, but you won't be long. Only then did Chu Yifeng feel an extremely shocking aura emanating from Ding Meng's body. If he also had telekinesis vision, he would have discovered that Ding Meng's entire body was burning with an invisible flame. This flame was like a holy light spreading out. It had a powerful aura that made people feel awe. At this point, the first 6 origins had been activated to the limit. He had cast a shield to cancel out his origin energy. Just how precise was his control? However, when Chu Yifeng saw that Ding Meng was still standing firm even after the shield was broken, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He swept his foot out with ease. Pa! This was a very soft sound, and everyone's mouths were wide open. Chu Yifeng's thunderous kick had actually been caught by Ding Meng's ankle with a casual stretch of his hand. All of his powerful attacks disappeared without a trace, including the layer of origin energy on his leg. It shattered into countless pieces and disappeared in the wind. I told you that you'd get sick very soon, so you really won't get better. Ding Meng grabbed Chu Yifeng's right leg and raised his hand to chop at a speed that seemed a little blurry. In the eyes of others, this kind of speed was impossible to see clearly. Chu Yifeng suddenly let out a heart-wrenching cry. Then his entire body was sent flying dozens of meters away and finally landed heavily on the suspension bridge. Everyone looked down again and saw that Chu Yifeng's calf had been separated from his knee. Ding Meng had actually cut off Chu Yifeng's leg with a single chop, and he didn't even use a sharp weapon to do so. He had just used his bare hand to chop off Chu Yifeng's leg. Ding Meng's strength had far exceeded their imagination. With a bam sound, Ding Meng threw the badly mutilated leg to the ground and walked slowly towards the suspension bridge with an expressionless face. At this moment, everyone felt fear, and one by one, they slowly retreated. Chu Yifeng also knew where he had gone wrong. Of all the things he shouldn't have done, he shouldn't have taken the initiative to attack. He was a tough person, and as long as he was well prepared, no matter how strong Ding Meng was, he wouldn't be able to cut off one of his legs in an instant. He had plenty of defensive martial arts techniques, but he had been suspicious and full of anger. He had taken the initiative to attack without holding back, which had instead given Ding Meng an opportunity. The Light Shadow's judgment was still correct. Anger would cause an imbalance, and the inner demons would harm you. Seeing Ding Meng approaching, Chu Yifeng was also afraid. Do you know who I am? I know, Ding Meng replied indifferently. one of the fourth-generation successors of the Haitian group, the great-grandson of Chu Ming Liang. Chu Yifeng endured the pain and gritted his teeth. Since you should understand that I am someone you can't touch casually. If you dare to touch me, you'll be hunted down by the entire Haitian group in the future. I understand. Ding Ming nodded. His expression was terrifyingly cold. So you deserve to die even more. As soon as he finished speaking, Ding Ming twisted his wrist in the air, and Chu Yifeng was directly sucked in front of him by telekinesis. A dark golden light flashed past like lightning, and Chu Yifeng couldn't make a sound. There was only one person standing in the middle of the square, waving at him. No matter how much he guessed, he would never have guessed that this person would be waiting for him there. Chapter 494. In the square, a slender woman was standing against the wind. She was wearing a black and green, tight-fitting intergalactic fashion, which made her look both spirited and attractive. This person was Dai Yi, whom he had not seen for a long time. Ding Ming, you're finally back. I've been waiting for you for 7 years. Dai Yi looked very excited. Ding Ming did not dare to be careless at all. He did not know whether this Dai Yi was real or fake. He spread out his psychic vision. The waves on Dai Yi's body were not obvious. She was only an intermediate war venerable, which was reasonable. After all, when Ding Ming left the Holy Grail Federation, Dai Yi was only an intermediate warrior. It was reasonable for her to become a war venerable after 7 years. Dai Yi ran over cheerfully and said in an even more excited tone, Ding Ming, I knew you wouldn't die. They all said that your survival rate in the space jump was less than 1%, but I knew you wouldn't die so easily. I've been waiting for you to come back. Stop, Ding Ming said decisively and stared at her coldly. Who are you? Dai Yi was stunned. Ding Ming, don't you recognize me? Ding Ming said coldly, I know you're Dai Yi, but you're definitely not the real Dai Yi. Dai Yi's eyes turned red. Ding Ming, have you forgotten me? Ding Ming did not bother to talk nonsense. The Katoptra deflection sword at his waist flew out and turned into a long sword in the air, slashing at Dai Yi's head. Dai Yi jumped in fright and quickly retreated. However, the long sword did not chase after her. Even if Ding Ming knew that this Dai Yi was a fake, he could not bear to attack the mirror image of Dai Yi. In his past experience, Miss Dai had been a great help to him. Dai Yi's expression changed as expected. She became cold and gloomy. You are indeed ruthless. You even dare to kill your own woman. Ding Ming raised his long sword and said coldly, Stop pretending. Who are you? He. Dai Yi suddenly lowered his head and let out a burst of strange laughter. This sinister laughter made people tremble. In the next moment, Dai Yi's appearance began to change. After a series of contortions, the beautiful and moving Dai Yi turned into a hale and hearty white-haired old man. He had an imposing appearance. His eyes were spirited, his expensive suit was well-tailored, and his shiny leather shoes were spotless. Ding Ming's heart sank. This person turned out to be Chu Ming Liang. This time, he had truly met a formidable opponent. Chu Ming Liang's demeanor was still calm and steady. Long time no see, Ding Ming. Ding Ming didn't answer. He wasn't sure if this was Chu Ming Liang or the water droplet from before, because his telekinesis vision could no longer detect the depth of this person's cultivation. Chu Ming Liang's body exuded an extremely strong wave of energy. This was not the aura of a warlord. However, Chu Ming Liang seemed to know what Ding Ming was thinking. However, Chu Ming Liang's origin energy had stimulated the origin energy in his body to circulate wildly. This was not a healthy circulation because it was extremely chaotic and violent. Ding Ming clenched his fists. After circulating his origin energy to its limit 8 times, this violent energy was finally suppressed. Chu Ming Liang said in surprise, I've been away for 3 days, but I'm really looking at you in a new light. You're not bad, kid. Ding Meng would not sit and wait for his death this time. He changed from being passive to active. He flew out and directly struck out with a flame-rushing punch. He knew that when facing an expert, he had to use simple martial arts because they required the most proficiency. The ignorant are truly fearless. Chu Ming Liang did not dodge. Instead, he raised his fist and met the attack head-on. There was an earth-shattering explosion. For experts of their level, the surrounding environment could not withstand the destruction of such power. With Ding Meng as the epicenter, the ground was completely torn apart, and a large crater was formed as soon as his fist struck out. This time, the one who suffered was Chu Ming Liang. This was Ding Meng's old trick. When the rushing punch was used, it would penetrate the opponent and force them back. However, when Chu Ming Liang slid back, Ding Meng would use a backhand punch, and the explosive force landed solidly on Chu Ming Liang's chest. The power of this combination punch would have turned Gu Ping, Fu Zhonghui, and the others into a bloody mist on the spot. However, Chu Ming Liang's chest was pulled back, and his entire body slid back across the ground until he was more than 40 meters away. Only then did his right heel fiercely stomp on the ground. Boom, 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 boom. Several explosions occurred in the plaza behind him. Countless flaming raindrops once again sprayed into the air. This guy was actually able to guide Ding Meng's power into the ground. Of course, this kind of guiding technique naturally had its flaws. By the time he steadied himself, a blazing, sharp sword chi had already enveloped him from above. Ding Meng leapt high into the air, and the sword form of Katoptra deflection slashed furiously at Chu Ming Liang. The sword had not yet arrived, but the sword had already slashed out with a fiery, crescent-shaped sword light. This was definitely not a real sword light. It was definitely origin energy that had been released. Ding Meng could even use his weapon to release origin energy. He really could not underestimate him. Chu Ming Liang also rapidly increased his origin energy, and his arms pushed out to meet the sword light. If Chu Ming Liang didn't fall, then he would be the one to die. The 5 Ding Meng stood in 5 different positions with Chu Ming Liang in the center. Ding Meng used the 5 sword techniques of the solitary sword of Zhao at the same time. Ding Meng had spent 10 years on the expedition to practice these techniques. Back then, any one of these techniques could severely injure the ancient wyvern. He didn't believe that Chu Ming Liang would be able to withstand one of his full-strength attacks. The 5 Ding Mengs attacked at the same time, without any hesitation. This scene was hard to describe with words. If one were to look down from above, they would see a celestial rain of immortal spirit stars falling from the sky, enveloping Chu Ming Liang within. Countless Ding Mengs were shuttling back and forth within this holy light. The sword light was no longer a storm, but rather a boiling ocean. Below them was a world of light, a world of swords. The sword shadows covered everything, and the light erased everything. The sound of pearls and jade falling onto a plate was shockingly loud. This sound wave actually caused the surrounding hills to shake. No one could see clearly what was happening inside. After about 2 minutes, all the dazzling images disappeared. The 5 Ding Mengs floated back to their original positions. Their figures gradually blurred, and the 5 merged back into one. With a click, Ding Meng's Katoptra deflection turned back into a belt and fastened it to Ding Meng's waist. Ding Meng stood where he was and stared coldly at Chu Ming Liang. Chu Ming Liang didn't seem to move either. He just smiled coldly. Any more? Ding Meng was very calm. No more. Chu Ming Liang nodded. Good, very good. After he said this, the invisible flames on his body disappeared. The plating on his body shattered. His whole body turned into a beam of light and rose into the sky. The beam of light gradually thinned until it disappeared. This Chu Ming Liang was indeed a product of Xinguang Technologies. However, Ding Ming also opened his mouth and spat out a large cloud of blood. Without another word, he sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. He focused his mind and calmed his breathing. During the extreme attack, just now, only Ding Ming himself knew what had happened. Apart from the 9th origin point, the other 8 origin points in his body had been damaged to varying degrees. Among them, the 8th origin point had suffered the most damage. This was because Chu Ming Liang's original power plating seemed to have a rebounding effect. Every time Ding Ming attacked, he felt as if he was cutting his own body. At this time, the surrounding scenery twisted and turned into countless streaks of light and shadow. The whole world was spinning. This was definitely the reactivation of Shengguang Technologies' transmission array. In the past, the transmission array was teleportation. It could send you very far away in a second. Ding Ming gritted his teeth and began to increase the 9th point of origin ability energy. Only then was the discomfort barely dispelled. When he opened his eyes once more, Ding Ming was finally able to clearly see the interior of the Divine Hall. This was completely an imperial palace from the ancient times, and it was slightly similar to the imperial palace of the Wei dynasty. It was simple, grand, and magnificent. However, all the decorations were in the form of light. In the distance opposite the main door, a throne faced the entrance. It stood on the steps, and there seemed to be a person sitting on it. Upon closer inspection, it was actually not a person, but a set of clothes. It was a shiny golden robe with a belt, shoulder pads, and combat boots. They were all present. Together, they formed the posture of a person sitting on the throne. This person seemed to be using his fist to support his temple as he sat on the throne, deep in thought. Damn, what was this thing? Ding Ming was really frightened. Just a set of clothes that had been worn could exert such a terrifying pressure. He did not dare to imagine the strength of the owner of this set of battle clothes. How earth-shattering was his strength? Xiao AI analyzed. The owner may have already died and turned into nothingness. That's why he left behind this set of clothes. Look at his clothes. They are not from Shengguang Technologies, but from solid objects. They should be quite old. Shengguang Technologies could transform energy into solid objects. Ding Ming noticed that the edges of the person's combat boots already had many fine cracks. They did not seem to be caused by injuries, but rather a natural aging process. Items from Shengguang Technologies could age? There was only one explanation. This place had existed for an unknown period of time. Using years as a unit of measurement was far from enough. It could be hundreds, thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years. However, Ding Ming did not dare to let his gaze linger on the throne for too long. Every second he spent on the throne was a great drain on his energy. When he shifted his gaze elsewhere, he realized that in the center of the palace below the throne, there were 2 rows of guards holding spears. There were a total of 50 of them. Similarly, these guards only had their clothes and did not exist in person. However, they looked very lifelike, as if they were real people. The spears in their hands were also in the form of light. This made Ding Ming immediately look at his Shengguang bracers. The 2 of them looked quite similar. The attire of the 50 guards also exuded a powerful pressure. If these people were already dead, then when they were still alive, Ding Ming estimated that any one of them would be able to kill him with just a flick of a finger. What was this place? Was it the warehouse of Shengguang Technologies? Or was it the ruins of the Mao Xing civilization? Ding Ming could not imagine it. This was not something he could imagine. At this moment, a blue star finally appeared in the center of the palace. Ding Ming had seen it before in the territory of Shengguang Technologies on Madison. He knew that it was Mao Xing's singularity. However, this singularity was not simply in the form of a dot this time. It slowly extended a strip of light and gradually took shape. In the blink of an eye, it had transformed into a glowing human form. Upon closer inspection, this person's appearance was actually in Dai Yi's image. Ding Ming decisively took a few steps back. It looked like he was about to summon his catoptric deflection. All sorts of strange and bizarre things had happened along the way. He had to be on guard. Don't be nervous. The singularity spoke in a human voice. I'm just using your memories to transform into someone you're familiar with. You always feel more at ease when you talk to your own kind. Ding Ming said in a low voice, "You're the singularity of Shunguang Technologies?" The singularity was slightly surprised. "You're carrying the weapons of my race's soldiers. It's normal for you to know about Shunguang Technologies. However, you actually know about the singularity. It seems like you've come into contact with the scattered lands before." Scattered lands? Ding Ming was also curious. What kind of place is that? The singularity did not answer the question directly. He seemed to be deep in thought. "There are many fragments in your memories that are not connected. It seems like they've been masked by my race's energy. It seems that part of your encounter on Madison has something to do with the scattered lands." Ding Ming said, "Are you referring to Mao Yi Temple?" The singularity nodded and said, "That's considered a scattered land." Ding Ming felt that Xinguang Technologies was not only profound but also mysterious. However, he did not want to think too much about it. If he continued to delve deeper, it would only give him a headache. "All right, what kind of place is this?" Ding Ming asked curiously. The singularity asked in return, "What kind of place are you referring to?" Ding Ming was confused by the question. "This temple," the singularity said, "this is not a temple. This is a sanctuary." "A sanctuary?" Ding Ming's eyes widened in curiosity. "But this is clearly a palace." The singularity said, "You can understand it that way. However, its main function is to protect, conceal, and defend." Ding Ming once again looked at the guard around him and the person on the throne. "Is it protecting them?" The singularity said, "Yes, but unfortunately, they've been dead for some time. Their spirits have also entered a dormant state and are drifting in the depths of the endless sea of stars. What you see now is just a little bit of their aura when they were alive. Just a little bit of their aura was already so terrifying." Ding Ming cannot help but ask, "Who are these people?"